Welcome everyone to the January 17th Shakopee City Council meeting. I call the meeting to order at 7:01. Judy, would you take roll, please?
Yes, Mr. Mayor. Councilor Lehman?
Here.
Councilor Punt?
Here.
Councilor Whiting?
Here.
Councilor Clay?
Here.
Mayor Tabke?
Here. We all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right. Thank you very much, everyone. Item number 3, approval of tonight's agenda. Does anyone have any additions or corrections to the agenda? I would like to move item 10F1 to the beginning of the agenda. Is it better to go before consent or after consent, Mark?
We need to do it
After consent. To get the Vikings stadium discussion out of the way and let some folks head out. Is that okay? All right, I will accept motion to approve the agenda.
So moved.
So moved by Councilor Clay, seconded
Second.
by Councilor Puntz. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Motion passes unanimously. Item number 4, consent business. Are there any items you wish to remove from the consent agenda this evening? Councilor Lehman?
I'll move the consent agenda as presented.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Whiting. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
We read it
Oh,
first.
yes.
Oops.
I'm sorry, me and my getting things done. Read it for us, please, Mr.
Thank you.
McNeil.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Item 4A1 authorizes the hiring of Philip Sendelbach as probationary community service officer of Step E of Grade 2 of the city's 2012 non-union pay plan, contingent upon successful completion of pre-employment examinations. 4A2 approves a revised job description for the position of engineering secretary and authorizes staff to post the opening for internal applicants. 4A3 adopts a resolution amending the 2012 pay plan for part-time, temporary, and seasonal employees for the city of Shakopee. 4B1 authorizes a 2-year advertising agreement for the ice arena between the city of Shakopee and the Shakopee Hockey Association. 4B2 accepts with regret the resignation of Heidi Benedict from the Environmental Advisory Committee and authorizes staff to fill the vacant position. 4D1 adopts a resolution setting a public hearing date for February 21st, 2012 to consider the vacation of an easement on property located south of 4th Avenue and west of County Road 83. 4D2 approves the execution of the First Amendment to the developers agreements for Opus Minnesota Valley West located in Shenandoah Industrial Park. 4D3 adopts a resolution authorizing the adoption of the Shenandoah Business Park and Minnesota Valley West AUAR update. 4E1 authorizes the execution of a construction cooperative agreement for the County Road 69 project between the city of Shakopee and Scott County, and the execution of a reimbursement agreement between the city and Shakopee Public Utilities for utility work as part of that same project. 4E2 authorizes the purchase of one new 24-foot trailer from Lano Equipment, Inc. for a price of $17,192.98 for use by the Public Works Department. 4E3 authorizes the purchase of 4 police interceptors from the Nelson Auto Center in the amount of $103,620.86 in accordance with the State of Minnesota Cooperative Purchasing Contract. 4E4 authorizes the purchase of one new 2012 Ford Fusion sedan from Midway Ford for a price of $17,320.55, again in accordance with the state purchasing contract for use by the Building Inspections Division. 4F1 authorizes bills and pass-throughs to be paid in the amount totaling $1,092,696.70. 4F2 approves minutes of the January 3rd, 2012 City Council meeting. 4F3 approves an application grants a temporary on-sale liquor license to the Shakopee Senior Graduation Party, Inc. for a February 9th, 2012 wine tasting fundraiser at Canterbury Park 1000 Canterbury Road. 4F4 approves an application grants a temporary on-sale liquor license with the Church of St. Mark, 350 South Atwood Street for February 11th, 2012 as their annual Winterfest celebration. 4F5 approves a renewal of the city's worker comp insurance policy with the League of Minnesota Cities Insurance Trust for 2012 for a total deposit premium of $277,069. And finally, for F6, authorizes the hiring of Lake Country Doors for the replacement of 17 overhead doors at a cost not to exceed $63,500, and authorizes the purchase of material supplies and equipment for the replacement of 12 service doors at a cost not to exceed $10,000, all for use in the engineering building.
All right, with that, I will entertain a motion to approve the consent business.
Here you have a motion and a second.
Thank you. Any discussion on those? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, do we want to do 10F2, 10F1 now or after item 5? What's best?
Probably in view of the number of people here, you could probably move to 10F1 now.
Okay. We're now moving to agenda number 10F1, resolution of support for Minnesota Vikings Stadium. Resolution number 7161. And we have, tonight we have Angie Whitcomb from the Shakopee Chamber of Commerce and Corey Merrifield from SaveTheVikes.org here to give a presentation just to get everyone caught up if they don't know. Last week, myself, Corey Merrifield from SaveTheVikes.org, Representative Mike Beard, Senator Claire Roebling, a few other representatives from Scott County and around the area, and Angie Whitcomb and I presented a plan to the governor for bringing the People's Stadium to Shakopee on the former ADC Telecom World Headquarters, and we want to give everybody an update as to where we're at with that right now, and want to catch everyone up so that we have everything information out there. And I ask Angie and Corey to give their presentation at this point, and then we'll discuss and take some public comment. Angie.
Mayor, Council, thanks for having us here today. Technically challenged, so I don't know if this is going to pop up or not. There we go.
Hi.
Nicely done.
That's actually it. I'm done.
That was Corey's part. Tonight, we just wanted to tell you a little bit and introduce some of the details about the site plan for you, the council, and for those at home. As the mayor indicated, we proposed the site as the 130-acre lot, formerly ADC World Headquarters. What makes this ideal? A couple of things. It's adjacent to a city-owned 105-acre lot zone for park and recreation, containing a lake, room for parks, trails, overnight camping. We have 9 hotels here in Shakopee within a 5-mile radius, and if you expand to our neighboring communities, we have over 2,500 hotel rooms today that could help house the guests we would hope to have here. It would be conveniently located 5 miles south of Winter Park, right between their training camp and the Vikings World Headquarters. What we think makes Shakopee unique and ideal for this proposal is that we already have a very vibrant, healthy entertainment corridor with Valley Fair, Canterbury Park, Raceway Park, and Mystic Lake right down the road. Annually, we already host about 6 million visitors to our community per year. What we're proposing with the Viking Stadium would bring visitors here during our slow season, which I know from experience would make our hotel owners very happy, and I'm guessing our restaurants and gas stations and everyone else as well. Some additional site benefits. We have the existing infrastructure because of the ADC buildings. We've got electrical, water, sewer, and communications already in place. There would be no environmental cleanup needed, as very much different than the Arden Hills site. There's only 2 property sellers as compared to dozens of them at the Minneapolis options. We have room for fan plaza, tailgating, trailgating, and railgating. It would have lake access, providing ice skating, pond hockey, snowmobile parking in the winter, fishing, paddle boating, paddle boarding. We would have room for outdoor bars with patios and overlooking the water in the summer. Truly, there's nothing that we don't have and can't offer there that somebody else could. We've kind of checked all of the boxes, if you will, for the must-haves in this site. From a transportation standpoint, the site as it sits today with the stadium on it would be capable of hosting 22,000 parking spots and a retail and hotel space. We would allow for overflow parking and tailgating at Canterbury Park, Valley Fair, and Raceway Park with shuttle service very similar to that of Soldier Field in Chicago. There obviously are some infrastructure issues, minor infrastructure issues that we would have to resolve. In comparison to the other sites, we think ours are far less entailed and less costly. We already have 4 existing major points of entry, 169, 101, 13, and Canterbury Road. 494 and 169, that interchange is being taken care of as we speak. 13 and 101, the 3-way interchange will be completed in 2012, easing congestion for time in and time out. And we're hoping that Highway 101 River Bridge would move from a proposed 2-lane to a proposed 4-lane, which would ease congestions for fans coming from the southwest, where the majority of the season ticket holders currently live. Shakopee would add an extra exit ramp off of 169 and Valley Park Drive. And for future, the Bloomington Ferry Bridge is rail ready, light rail ready. So that's also an option in the future. As I mentioned, 40% of the Viking season ticket holders live in the metro area, and of that 40%, the majority of them live in the southwest, making this an ideal location. So we think it's a perfect spot. We think that from a business perspective, the jobs it would bring to our community, the fact that we already have the tourism draw here, and we already have the public coming here, and this is already a destination, it would help round out Shakopee as a year-round destination. And I think that's a win for the community from a jobs, from a revenue in. So I'd like to turn over to Corey to talk about how we plan to pay for this little project.
Thank you, Angie. And just like to echo some of her sentiment. I mean, if you were to think about 40% of the Minnesota Vikings fan base lives within the metro area, and the majority of that 40% actually lives in the West Metro. So we're talking about Shakopee, Eden Prairie, Minnetonka, Plymouth. So a lot of those people would actually be coming down 101. When you think about the revitalization that could offer to the businesses along 101, between where it comes over on the bridge up to where this proposed site would be, I think it's absolutely fantastic. And when you talk about the jobs, I mean, you would have 7,500 people coming in and out of your city every day to help build this. And I can only imagine what that would do for the businesses in this community. So we certainly appreciate and applaud Angie's efforts to bring this to the community and the support that we've received from the business community. So with that said, let me talk about what I think most people in this room here are wondering, and that is how are we going to pay for this? And let me start by just relieving a lot of pressure by saying that it's not going to be with your tax dollars, and we're not going to raise your property taxes. So with that, when Mayor Tabke, first of all, thank you, members of the council, and Mr. Mayor, for having me here to talk about this plan with you. When Mayor Tabke approached me about, his first week in office and had this bold idea, wanted to know if it was crazy. Absolutely, it wasn't crazy. When you look at the ways that we could finance this thing and put it together, when you look at the existing infrastructure and the roads coming in and out of there, I mean, having 4 major freeways, 4 major ways in and out of that stadium is 2 more major ways than what you have in Arden Hills. And you certainly have the parking that you don't have downtown Minneapolis. So there's a lot of strengths that the Shakopee site has to offer. So when we talk about how do we pay for that, a couple of things that we take into consideration. One, the Vikings actually contribute $32 million a year annually to the tax revenues of the state of Minnesota. The host community, it's not on the slide, but I'll say it, the host community that has the Minnesota Vikings typically does anywhere between $100 to $145 million a year in commerce. That's quite a bit of money coming into your community, and I think there would be an absolute benefit to that. When we talked about how to pay for this, we put together what we call the fans plan, and it's really as simple as 1, 2, 3. 1, you take a portion of the Minnesota Vikings, they put a hefty down payment on the stadium. 2, the people that would use the stadium the most should contribute through user-based fan fees. And finally, our local hometown heroes over at Canterbury Park could help with Racino and the tax revenue that's generated from Racino proceeds. So when we talk about the Vikings proceeds, the way the G4 loan, from my interpretation of it, is structured is that if they put up $200 million, they'll get a $200 million loan, which means they come to the table with $400 million. That's has the Vikings paying about 43%, which is on par with the national average, which is closer to 39 to 40%. The realistic option here, I think, is the Vikings paying that amount. When you look at where they're at in terms of revenue, out of 32 teams in the NFL, the Vikings are ranked dead last. Actually, the top 2/3 of the league subsidize the Vikings, and without those subsidies, they would be in the red. Just a quick glimpse for the members of the council and a review for Mr. Mayor of the total public subsidy, none of which, again, would come from the city of Shakopee, except for the portion of the Racino tax revenue. So when we talk about the other 2/3 of this, the user-based fan fees would account for $16 million, and Racino would have a $29 million annual contribution after a one-time down payment of $45,000. When we look at how we paid that off, even the most aggressive considerations, this would easily pay for itself in 29 years. It'll probably come out closer to 20 years and make close to a $1 billion profit for the state of Minnesota and quite a bit for the host community. So when you break down how the financing is done on the user side, one of the things that I've worked with is the Minnesota State Lottery to pull together numbers in terms of what would be generated from a scratch-off, a Vikings-related scratch-off. And currently they're pacing $4 to $5 million. I actually heard that they came in closer to $6 to $7 million last year. But being on the conservative side, you can count on $4 to $5 million a year coming from a Viking scratch-off. If you were to put a ticket surcharge of $5 on every ticket sold at a Vikings game, that would actually generate $3 million a year annually. For those that are concerned that might put the that extra $20 would put the cost of the game out of reach for Joe and Jill America, we could also tier that in a way that most of that is paid for those in the lower bowl of the stadium and those that use the club suites and the corporate suites. Stadium naming rights, CSL, who does a lot of research in this area, has evaluated and come back with a figure that the naming rights for the new stadium at a minimum would be worth $14 million. We propose that the naming rights be split up accordingly to the contribution between the public and the Vikings. So if the Vikings put in 40% and the public puts in 60%, the public should get 60% of that $14 million, which could be used to be put back towards the stadium, and the Vikings would get 40% of that. So that comes out to about $6 million. Finally, I did some research, worked with the Department of Transportation in Wisconsin, which ironically has very similar statistics as Minnesota in terms of overall population and the number of people driving. So leveraging their data after you were factoring in the overhead and the production costs for making a customized Minnesota Vikings license plate or any other Minnesota sports team license plate, you come out to about $500,000 a year, which comes back to the $16 million at a glance there for you guys. So in terms of the public financing, we like the Racino option. Big fans of Randy Sampson and Canterbury Park and what that brings to this community. Being a Shakopee resident here, I frequent Canterbury Park all the time with my family to go watch the horses. I think it's a fantastic venue, and I'd love to see nothing more than that business thrive. And one of the ways that they can do that is by adding slot machines and compete with some of the other stadiums here in the state of Minnesota. So what we like about the Racino aspect is that there's no use of state of Minnesota general funds. So again, your income tax is not being put towards that. This plan uses, again, no sales, income, or property tax. There would be, the Racino would essentially generate, and this is on the low side, about $125 million a year in tax revenue to the state of Minnesota. And that's not even counting the 500 to 1,000 jobs Racino would create and what that would do for the agricultural business, a good portion of which, by the way, is here in Shakopee and in Scott County. So as I mentioned, we could actually pay this thing off in 29 years, so less the $400 million from the Vikings, using that $45 million as a down payment, and again, using the most conservative of payment schedules. If you were to break out the $400 million over 3 years, you would actually pay for the Vikings and be back in the black on year 30. The longer we wait, it's $50 million increase to build the stadium. So by no means is that something that I want to threaten the council with. I just want you guys to know that that's the amount every year we wait that the cost of the stadium goes up. Happy to answer any questions the council has about financing or the Viking Stadium plan.
Yeah, absolutely. Does anyone have questions at this point for Angie and Corey or city staff at all? Councilor Lehman.
Couple questions. First one that comes to mind is the proposal that was submitted on the 11th to the governor's office. Is that a city proposal or a private citizen proposal?
Well, this plan was put together given data used from the city by myself and SaveTheVikes.org. A lot of the financial packaging that you see here was actually done over a year ago and could be applied not just to the city of Shakopee, could be applied to any of the sites that are out there. So whether it's Arden Hills or any of the three Minneapolis venues, this is a plan that could be applied to any one of those.
Okay, the letters in my information that were submitted to the governor and to Mr. Ziggy Wolf are on Shakopee letterhead, signed by the mayor, and it has the logo on top of this proposal. So I'm trying to decide if this is a private citizen initiative or a city initiative.
It sounds like to me, Mr. Councilman, that one, that's a question that should be directed to the mayor, and two, I guess that's really up to you to decide.
Okay.
Yeah, this is an initiative by the mayor of Shakopee.
On behalf of the city of Shakopee or on your own?
I guess it depends on which way you want to look at it. Yes, it's on behalf of the city of Shakopee as a whole, but nothing has been committed or approved by the city as a whole by this body. So.
I'd like the record to reflect for the council that we essentially were, I don't want to use the word duress, but we were under very strict deadlines to try to pull this thing together. And our most immediate concern was to, one, if we wanted to get Shakopee into the game, we had to get this proposal into the governor's office before the 12th. So our goal in using critical thinking here was to pull this plan together to at least get us in the game and then circle back with the city council, the members of Shakopee, and then continue to due diligence, assuming that the Vikings were interested in going down that path.
Okay. And Mayor, I've got a couple other concerns I'd like to go over
Yes.
with the plan. The 2030 comp plan, the transportation portion of it talks about without a Racino or without a stadium, 101 being at 29,000, 169 at 73,000. There's no capacity known on Valley Park Drive. 101 Bridge, 23,000. And one issue that come to my mind was if, let's do a hypothetical and say we have a Racino and a stadium and we get the infrastructure built to handle that, how do we make sure we don't come back 5 or 10 years later to increase the capacity for any expected build out in Shakopee? So what I'm getting at is any upgrades to transportation infrastructure has to take into consideration the comp plan to 2030 so that we're not finding ourselves in a position of having these events taking place with a major construction zone in the future. Making it hard to get to the site.
Right.
Okay?
You were more making a comment there, correct?
Well, that's a concern, so.
Absolutely.
And we don't know who or what any improvements needed are and who's paying for them or what they actually cost.
Well, if I may, Mr. Councilman, so a couple of things. One, we're very blessed here in the city of Shakopee because we have Representative Mike Beard, who's the chairman of the Transportation Commission, Transportation Committee, excuse me, and he is very knowledgeable about these issues. I would also like the record to reflect that here in the city of Shakopee, we already have 6 million people coming in and out of the city. On a busy year, you're going to see 1.1 million visitors to that site. That's literally less than 15% of what is already coming in and out of the city. So I don't know that it's going to have that much of a dramatic impact. Now, an NFL stadium that we've proposed here on any given Sunday would seat 65,000 people, which translates to 20 to 22,000 cars. As we mentioned before, there are other ways to minimize that if the city so wishes to do so, whether it's through light rail, through the southwest corridor that'll be going into Eden Prairie, the bike trails that are coming across into the city, or using the bus and park and rides and things like that. So there are a lot of different ways that you could do that. But at the most, you're never going to see more than 75,000 people in that stadium, and that would be for a Super Bowl.
Right, and my concern is 6 million over the course of a year compared to 75,000 in the course of a couple hours is a big difference.
So I'm concerned. Are you suggesting that you don't want to see the city grow?
No, I'm suggesting that the improvements that are currently being made on 101 and 13, 101 River Crossing, are to take care of current congestion, not a future use. So.
Well, I certainly can't speak on the behalf of the Department of Transportation, but I think they're fair questions and ones that should be addressed to Representative Mike Beard and his committee, who would definitely have more information around that.
Okay. Next one would be public safety, with a little over twice our current population coming to town in a 2-hour, 3-hour time frame, tailgating, that type of thing. We haven't really had the analysis done by police and fire to see what we would need to do to adequately preserve public safety in that situation and what that cost would be to the Shakopee taxpayer. So I know they have their own on-site security for the Vikings, but I think there still would be a cost for Shakopee, and I don't know what that number is. I know, the 10 years that I've served, we've had 2 studies and 2 possible Racino proposals where we did analysis, and the workload increase was about 10% for just a Racino.
Sure.
So using that rationale, I'm sure there's some kind of an impact from a stadium that would have to be taken into
There is,
consideration.
and I would certainly agree that there's some diligence that has to be done here, and we're not going to have all these answers. But I can tell you off the top of my head, having, one, I work 3 blocks from the Metrodome, 2, I'm very close with Mayor Rybeck's office in the city of Minneapolis. I know for a fact there's 40 to 50 police officers that patrol the Metrodome on game day. And to your previous point of people coming in for a 2 to 3 hour period, actually, I would say that it's closer to about an 8-hour period. People that come into tailgate usually come in anywhere between 6 a.m. to 10 a.m. And then the rest of your people that don't tailgate come in between 10 to 12. So it's really trickled out throughout the morning.
Okay. Then the current zoning on the property is industrial. It would require a comprehensive plan amendment and a rezoning.
Mhm.
It would also require a resolution of support for Racino. And I guess if the council as a body doesn't support the rezoning or a Racino, I mean, there's a lot of potential holes in this proposal based on individual feelings on council.
So let me back up a second here. Has Randy Sampson not been, are you telling me that he spent millions of dollars on lobbying for Racino and he hasn't approved a Racino through the city of Shakopee?
It has passed on 2 previous councils, not this body, as it's
Okay.
currently made up.
All right.
The parking model, one set of numbers, it may have been a media mistake or whatever, shows 30-some thousand. This plan, I think, had 20-some thousand. So there's a discrepancy there. And
Sure, I can answer that for you if you'd like. You could put up to, I think it was 35,000 stalls, but I mean, really, you're not going to need that many. And frankly, one of the things that we're trying to do to entice the developer to come down here to build, that being the Wilfs, is that you may not necessarily need all that. You could do something like, say, 10,000 to 15,000 surface lots for those that want to tailgate, build a parking ramp, and develop the rest of the land into retail, to a fan plaza, into a Hall of Fame, into hotels. I mean, really, I guess that's up to the developer, but the point was to illustrate that you could see, could put that much capacity in there as a open surface parking lot.
Along with significant opportunity with Canterbury Park and Valley Fair for parking people at those other areas within the city and then shuttling them back and forth like they do at Soldier Field.
right, but associated with that, I think the difference from here to the inner city is that there's a lot of people that attend the games there that have the ability to take light rail, take mass transit. They have options that we don't have. So I suspect that more would have to drive because it's limited options to get here. So from a parking standpoint, I think we would have to have more than what they have in the inner city because we don't have them options.
Well, again, the 22,000 seats, Mr. Councilman, is that the 22,000 parking spots comes from the research that Arden Hills has done. And I worked very closely with Joe Murphy, Commissioner Bennett, Commissioner Ortega, and the research they've done, which they're in a very similar situation. That right now there is very little public transportation up there. They would have to be able to have a capacity of 22,000 open surface parking spots.
And I also think any agreements with Valley Fair or Raceway Park or Canterbury, it's,
So, Mr. Mayor,
I don't know if that's the city's deal. I think that's between the Vikings and them individual
yeah.
entities to work that out themselves.
Well, they have, we have seen the email exchanges. They have expressed their support for this project.
I'm disappointed that the public hasn't had the opportunity, and frankly, the council, to address, talk about this issue besides tonight after the fact that it's been turned in. Staff hasn't been able to weigh in. I kind of feel like the whole process has been sidestepped from the normal process that I'm used to over the last 10 years.
Well, Mr. Councilman, again, you'll have to forgive Brad and myself. I'm used to dealing with politics at a state level, so I'm not familiar with how most of the city stuff works. And We're both young guys, new to this game. So by no means was any of this intentional.
Well, I can tell you the chairman of the transportation, Mr. Beard, doesn't have the authority to bypass the House or the Senate or the governor either, so he's got this pretty much the same process.
But I would say that he's very well liked and very well respected and has a lot of power in the Minnesota State Legislature.
Still has to have a vote. With that being said, you know, it would be nice to have some of this information known before jumping into something, because I'd like to see a traffic analysis, to be honest with you. I'm a little leery about so many cars coming to one site, and by all means, I want the Vikings to stay here. I like the Vikings, and I want to see them stay in Minnesota. Wouldn't mind having them in Shakopee, but before I commit to that, I want to make sure that we have the capacity to actually do it right.
Yeah, and as would we.
And if things have to be upgraded, that somebody's committed to that, whether it's the city or the county or the state or whoever, that them commitments are made so that we don't have that we're not chosen site, and now we have to start fighting about who's funding what.
All right.
So
Well, if I may offer a suggestion, sir, one of the things that I've seen, like David Grant, the mayor of Arden Hills, do is that, you know, they essentially passed a resolution to explore the options of what benefits, what costs, what impact a Minnesota Vikings stadium would have on the community of Arden Hills. I would suggest to the council that maybe you pass a similar resolution. Doesn't mean you're bringing the Vikings to Shakopee. Doesn't mean you've committed anything. It simply means that you're open to the idea and you want to explore and do the diligence, such as you suggested, as a traffic analysis and things like that, to see if it's really a viable option. And as you start to pull some of those figures together, if things don't necessarily work out for Arden Hills or some of the other sites, I think that would make Shakopee much more attractive and a much more viable option.
Well, and my last comment, Mayor, would be that we've already heard the Vikings kind of telegraphed that we're not their top priority right now. So the question is, how much of the taxpayers' money do we spend on all these traffic analysis, security issues, and so on and so forth, to find out that we're not a viable option for the Vikings?
Right.
You know, so that's also something that has to be weighed out here. And you know, do we wait and see if we're viable and then see who's going to fund all these studies, or, you know, do we spend the money wastefully knowing that we might not have a shot at this? And, you know, it's a lot of big ifs going on here, and it's a pretty big project. Now, I'll point out that Arden Hills spent years and years putting their plans together, and here we've got a plan that's a couple days old. And
Arden Hills, sir, didn't
a
pass the
flower.
resolution until March of this year.
But how long have they been working on it?
Not until after March of this year, because it wasn't until the city of Minneapolis told the Vikings they weren't interested in working with them that they pursued the Ramsey County option.
And process moving forward from here is that the plan is with the governor right now, and this process is set up as a series of hurdles, basically, and we are trying to get over the first hurdle right now, which is with the governor's office. And I feel we have the perfect site for the Vikings to come to, and it's a really good financial plan that has some things that need to get dealt with the legislature. And this is, in my mind, one of the best possible places for the Vikings to move to. And so that's why we moved forward with the process we did in as much of a hurry as we did. Once the opportunity arose, we moved as fast as we could to get everything in line for getting a plan to the governor. The governor setting the deadline of last Thursday was the impetus for getting everything done. If we'd have had more time, we'd have been able to come to city council and get things done, but the governor simply didn't give us the time to get it done. And so we moved forward. So right now we're working on getting the concept, the site, the financial idea through the governor's office, and the governor this week is going to say what he thinks is the best plan. But when he does that, the game is not over by any means if it's not us, and I would be surprised if it is us at this point coming from the governor. What happens next is it goes to the legislature and the Vikings, and they work out a deal, and we are the only plan that has legislative support, publicly declared legislative support, and working really well toward that. So we are trying to position ourselves to be in the game and to stay in the game. And once it becomes clear that if and when someone says, we think Shakopee is a really good site and a great place to be, that's what will trigger the traffic studies and the in-depth analysis to make sure that what we've been told by multiple people is in fact accurate and moving forward. So what we're discussing tonight is concept and idea and big picture plan, taking into account the long term of it, but making sure that we get across that first hurdle first is where we're at tonight, and bringing a lot of jobs and a lot of infrastructure and a lot of opportunity and potential to Shakopee in this form. Who's next?
I can make a few comments.
Councilor
Sure.
Punt?
I don't necessarily have any questions. I just would like to comment and say that I agree with you, Mayor Tapke, that we're at the conceptual point, and this is simply a concept. And the reason that, I was excited to get the phone call and have the conversation with Mayor Tapke before this went public was essentially because I think it's very important that the Vikings stay in Minnesota. And I think that's a passion that Corey has carried through for quite some time,
A little bit.
obviously. So, I mean, just really big picture thinking here, it's the Vikings should stay in Minnesota, and that's the right thing. So how can we have this great opportunity to put forth an option? It doesn't mean that if the stars don't align, and there are a lot of things in this plan that have to happen for this to even ever land here. But we have the opportunity, why not put it out there as an option? Because it gives the Vikings something else to consider that perhaps they would not have considered before. So I commend you for rushing and putting the plan together and getting it out there. Because if it gives the Vikings an opportunity to stay in the state, it's a huge part of our economic fabric of Minnesota. And if the Vikings were ever to leave, we would probably spend the next 20 years trying to get a football team back here.
You're absolutely correct.
So
That's
this
twice
is
the
the time.
cost.
So I appreciate it.
Thank you.
Councilor Whiting?
No real questions, but I'd have to echo that. I think, it was the process was a little backwards, I guess, but in order to get to the governor's deadline, it had to go down the way it did, and that's unfortunate. And I don't think we should be spending any money on studies and assessments at this point, because, as soon as that Racino comes up at the House level, I think that's going to be the question of how this goes forward or not. When I was out campaigning this year, people were talking about economic development. That was the big topic for everyone. How do you do that in this kind of economy? You think big. And this is the kind of thinking that's going to get us there, get the jobs we need, and whether they're full or part-time, not only Canterbury, but at the stadium, opportunities for youth groups to earn some money, part-time kids, keep the kids off the streets with part-time jobs. That's a potential there. It's just a whole new entertainment district area that would enhance what Shakopee's already a part of, is the entertainment mecca of the state. There's a lot of questions to be addressed, a lot of them. Traffic, planning, public safety, the effects on the local businesses that are in the area. I did talk to a couple of them, and they're all excited too. Their shifts wouldn't conflict with any their times when a typical Vikings game would be played. Someone was mentioning noise, and I know at my house, if the Vikings get a touchdown, I'm not going to hear it because everybody's yelling already. And then somebody else said, well, they'll have concerts and thing, and I was trying to think, well, if there's a band that can bring in 75,000 people and fill a stadium like that, that's probably a band that we want to have coming to Shakopee anyway, just to come visit us. And I just don't think that that's a viable issue. The effect on crime will have to be looked at. Actually, I think if we do have part-time jobs out there, it'll probably reduce crime by keeping some of the kids off the streets. This is one of those things where I think we need to go ahead with the resolution of support before we do a lot of the studies, because I think the governor needs to see that we're behind it before we spend a lot of money, and we're going to have to do some continued research, but I'm not sure we want to jump in with both feet yet. And that's pretty much where I'm at on that. And one other point, I'm sorry. I'm not sure, maybe you guys can answer how the rail here, the Union Pacific here, would do any commuter rail. I don't think they would do anything like that, would they? But that's a viable option if it is possible.
It is a viable option. And since you mentioned rail, Representative Beard, also with rail and the airport, there's been concerns brought up about both of those with where our stadium is located. And he is entirely confident that it can be worked out, just the communication and getting everything coordinated correctly for when trains go through and making sure not to use the runways toward the stadium and those kinds of things would be, it's one of those things that is doable and can be done, so.
Councilman Whiting, a couple of points, if I may, to your statements. One, when you talk about traffic studies and things like that, waiting until after Racino hits the floor, I also wanted to bring it up, just as this financial package could be used at any other stadium, the financial package that's being put together by Rosen, Lanning, and the legislators at a state level could also work here as well. It's not going to close the gap as much as this plan is, but there is some reciprocity there. Also, when you talk about noise, the nearest house to that proposed stadium site is 1 mile away. So it's actually quite a bit of distance between that and that stadium. And I would also like to bring up that you also have Valley Fair there, which from my house on a windy day in the summer, I can actually hear people on Power Tower, and I live up by St. Francis. So I don't know that it's going to cause any more noise than what's already existing between Canterbury Park and Valley Fair, being that it's just down the street. So.
Thank you.
Councilor Clay.
Corey, to answer your question from earlier discussion, the difference between how things happen at the legislature and how they happen here at the local level is that here at the local level, we try to do things logically.
I'll pass that on to the legislature
Yeah,
for you, sir.
my biggest concern is traffic, that's first on my list. When the Canterbury Downs was being proposed, we had all kinds of assurances that traffic wasn't going to be a problem, that the existing roadways and infrastructure could handle it just fine. Then the racetrack opened, and after one large event, we caused gridlock throughout the entire southwestern metropolitan area. I'd have to see a very detailed traffic analysis to convince me that that sort of thing wouldn't happen again. The other problem too is that if we do wind up with a lot more traffic problems than were anticipated, those expenses are going to come down in large part down to the city here. And I'm not seeing where we're going to have the money to fund any major transportation improvements. The responsibility for that lies with the city, and not with the Chamber of Commerce or the Vikings or any other group. You know, we're the ones that are going to have to have that sitting on our shoulders. And if it is a long-term problem, we could wind up, even though we would have enjoyed 7,500 short-term jobs in the construction of the stadium, I would be concerned about how many jobs we might lose from businesses leaving the industrial park that it's being proposed to be built in because of traffic problems. This could be one of the best things that ever happened to the city, but it's also quite possible that it could wind up being one of the worst things that happens to the city. And from what I've seen so far, I have no way as a city councilman of being able to judge which it might be. You're calling it a proposal, or tonight somebody has been referring to it as a proposal. Prior to that, it was called a concept, and I'm not even sure you could really call it a concept yet. It doesn't appear to be more than magic markers on a aerial photograph, along with some very general guesstimates as to costs and expenses and income, probably written down on the back of a Perkins napkin.
Actually, sir, I'd like to
let me finish.
Sure. Here's your source data.
It's those two things and a large heaping of political pixie dust. If you're going to put all of your weight on getting Racino passed, I mean, with all the money that is available out there to people opposed to Racino, which have been making large political contributions to both parties, and have millions of dollars that they have spent and will spend on lobbying the legislature. I don't see that as a real viable option anytime soon. And then we're talking about a lot of road transportation, bridge improvements and things like that would have to come from the state legislature, and unless something has happened in the last couple of days that I'm not aware of, I think the state is fairly broke still. I don't think there's any way that we can get them to guarantee us the funding available to do those improvements to the 169 bridge, the 101 crossing, or other ramp improvements or intersection improvements. The other thing is we really don't need to pass a formal resolution saying that we would be willing to continue looking and studying this concept or proposal or whatever it winds up becoming. We're, as a city council, always ready to listen to anybody who comes before us with a development idea. They're always going to get our ear and get our full attention, and we're always going to be happy to study it once the information is available and presented to us, study it very carefully and make a decision based on what we feel is best for the city.
A couple things. I certainly share your sentiment and the sentiment of the council here that clearly some analysis would have to be done if this was to move forward. I mean, this isn't something we're just slapping down. Secondly, it's a stadium plan, not a proposal. It's a concept. Thirdly, if you have the proposal in front of you, you'll notice that there's an appendix in the back where all of my data has been referenced and researched, so it's not just pixie dust on paper. Thirdly, the state has a surplus right now of $800 million. And lastly, I don't think transportation improvements would be as expensive to make if you have 300 events and 12 Vikings games going on yearly, when, again, you're bringing in an extra $100 to $145 million a year in commerce to your city that you weren't expecting, or that you didn't count on now. Thank you.
All right, does anyone have any follow-up questions at all? Councilor Lehman?
How do we distinguish this plan that was turned in as a, if it's an official city plan, it was done without authority, but the bigger question is, there's items in that plan that tie the city to a write-in off of 169, which we don't have the authority to do because it's not our road.
Back to the fact that this plan is a beginning point. There's nothing in here that has been committed by the city. There's nothing in here that is the city is must do. This is like I said, it's a starting point. And if we take this starting point and get through the first hurdle, then that's when the real work begins in vetting everything and making sure the transportation works, making sure the infrastructure works, making sure finding a way to get things done to make this all work. These are really big plans and really big ideas, and they get done every day throughout the country, and it is something that I believe, at least, we are up to the task to get done. And it's not going to be perfect all the time. It's not going to be easy all the time. But we, as a city, have the wherewithal to get this done and to move it forward. And if we get past this first hurdle and it comes up that the transportation just simply won't work, we're not going to go any further than that because we won't get past the next hurdle. Like if 169 and 494 weren't being done right now, we would not be in the game in the slightest. We wouldn't have even thought about approaching this. It just wouldn't make any sense. And that is one hurdle that was crossed for us, and we are at this point right now. And so from where we're at, we need to move forward, and then once we do move forward, and I hope that we are able to, that's when the real work will begin with all the transportation studies and all that, and everything will be, any money spent will be approved by city council, and it will move forward from there. So it will follow all the processes. This is just getting the process moving, and the resolution is just us as a board voting on whether we think it's a good idea and send a signal to the Vikings and to the governor saying that we have a local partner, that we have something that is voted on and that our city council believes that this is the way to go. So this tonight could be a hurdle where it ends. I mean, that's where it is, and I think it's important, like you said, to bring it to city council as soon as possible and take it forward from there.
Mr. Mayor, if I may, short of approaching the Vikings and communicating with them that we wanted to meet the governor's deadlines and we had interest in bringing them to Shakopee, we've had no formal meetings with the Vikings, nor have we aggressively pursued formal meetings with the Vikings. And if I'm going to continue to support this as, one, a citizen of Shakopee, and two, as a member of and founder of SaveTheVikes.org, I would need to know that I had the city support behind me, because I'm not going to go chasing it if you guys are going to shoot it down. So again, I would propose to the council that you pass a resolution that you would be willing to take a look at this plan and investigate it to see if it's something that's viable. And part of that process would be to sit down and meet with the Vikings. Let's not put the cart in front of the horse. The Vikings haven't agreed to even come out to the site yet. But 5 weeks ago, Mayor Rybeck couldn't even get a call back from Winter Park, and now he's got a plan submitted to the Governor's Stadium, one that the Vikings are willing to consider. So things can change quickly. So I would advise the council to be forward-thinking, pass a resolution, and let's at least explore our options.
Thank you, Corey. At this point, I'd like to open it up if anyone in the audience has anything they'd like to say. Just a couple minutes, really quick. Please stay at the concept idea level and not get into details and weeds where we don't need to go right now. So is there anybody that like to have anything, like to say anything? Yeah, come on up and sign in, name and address, and just take a couple minutes, please.
Good evening. My name is Bruce Smith, longtime resident of Shakopee here. Live out on Dominion Avenue, just a little ways south of town. My wife and I moved to Shakopee here in 1988, so we've been here a long time. She grew up in Bloomington, I grew up over in Hudson. I don't know what brought us to Shakopee. Maybe it was the charm of what it was 22 years ago. Okay, things have changed drastically. Anyway, I'm the guy that wrote on the Facebook, let's leave them away from here. I don't have facts and figures. I don't have all this stuff. I'm a blue collar working guy is what I am. A stadium is probably the worst thing you could ever bring to Shakopee because with the stadium you're gonna bring riffraff. I don't know what you guys want to call it, but that's what I'm gonna call it. And I know I heard up here talking about maybe it'll provide some jobs and keep kids off the street. Well, you know what? Keeping kids off the street doesn't keep them out of trouble. My wife and I just spent about $12,000 sending my 21-year-old son through treatment for heroin addiction. He picked up that neat little habit right here in charming little Shakopee. And that probably wouldn't have happened when our population was still 10,000. That's about all I really need to say. And if I know this is just a concept, and I know it's not going anywhere because the Vikings aren't leaving Minneapolis. But if a shovel full of dirt gets taken from out there, we're out of here.
All right. Thank you, Mr. Smith. I appreciate it. Anyone else have anything they'd like to say? Yes.
Hello, Mayor Tabke and the council. My name is Jeff Weenus. I live here in Shakopee. I've moved here, we've been here for about 5 years now. And first off, I want to commend the team that worked on the concept and just all the hard work that they've put into this. not a longtime resident of Shakopee, but plan to be here for a long time. And the economic development that I think that this plan could bring, I think, is tremendous for the community. I think has the potential to improve quality of life here. And I understand the concerns of others who've been here for a lot longer than I have. But I think looking forward to the jobs that this could bring to continuing to make this an entertainment hub and entertainment destination for the not just Shakopee, but for the entire state and the region. I would encourage you to consider supporting this and continue to make Shakopee a better place for us all to live. So, thank you.
Thank you. Anyone else? All right. Now, is there any last minute city council questions or comments we need to make? All right. I will entertain a motion of approving resolution number 7161. Councilor
I'll
Whiting?
make a motion to approve resolution 7161, a resolution of support of a stadium to be constructed in Shakopee.
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Punt. Any discussion?
Question for the attorney. What kind of, or what does this do as far as obligating us in the future, one way or the other?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, the way the resolution is worded, it states that it's a resolution whereby the council is stating its intent to work with various other governmental agencies and the Vikings to address issues and overcome obstacles so that a stadium to serve the Vikings can be constructed in Shakopee. The way it's worded, it's a statement of approval, I mean, of a concept. I don't see how it binds you to anything else other than what it says.
Councilor Lehman?
Mr. Thompson, does the plan that was submitted bind us to anything, since we can't really determine if it's a city concept plan or a citizen concept plan?
Mr. Mayor, members of council, no.
Okay.
Any other discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed?
Aye.
Passes 3-2. With Councilors Clay and Lehman in dissent. All right. Thank you, everyone. Yes.
Want to take a short recess and let the crowd thin out, or
Yeah, how do I do that?
make a motion for a 10-minute recess?
Okay. Motion on the floor for 10-minute recess.
Second.
Seconded by Councilor Clay. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
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 Anyone opposed? We are in recess for 10 minutes. All right, I call the meeting back to order at 8:09. Moving on to item number 5, recognition of involved citizens by City Council. Anybody in there have anything we need to discuss tonight that you'd like the floor? All right, seeing none, tonight we have no public hearings. There is no business removed from consent agenda. Item number 7, recess for Economic Development Authority meeting. Except, I need to make there needs to be a motion.
Recess?
Motion by Councilor Clay,
Second.
seconded by Whiting. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? We recessed for Economic Development.
All right, I'd like to call this January 17th, 2012 session of the Economic Development Authority for Shakopee, Minnesota to order. Judy, can you please make note of the roll?
Yes, Madam President.
I would look for a motion to approve the agenda. Mr. Lehman,
Madam Chair, I'll move a motion to approve the agenda.
do I have a second?
Second.
Second, Mr. Clay. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. The next item on the agenda is approval of the minutes of December 20th, 2011. Do I have a motion to approve those minutes? Motion,
Madam
Mr. Clay?
President, I'll move to approve the minutes of December 20, 2011.
Thank you. Motion, Mr. Clay. Second.
Mr. Lehman, second.
Mr. Lehman. All those in favor?
Aye.
I'll
Opposed?
abstain.
With approved with Abstain by Mr. Whiting. You can please note that. All right, our next item on the agenda is election of officers for 2012. I will turn the floor over to Mr. McNeil.
Thank you, Madam President. Traditionally, there has been a rotation of the officers for the EDA. As you are leaving, it would then mean that typically the Vice President, which has been Commissioner Clay, would move up to that. We have typically not had newly elected people serve in the President or Vice President position. If that is the case, then Commissioner Lehman would be the logical choice on that. For treasurer, there's nothing that says that the seated mayor would have to do that. If you go back 1 year beyond what's in your packet, you'll see that Commissioner at that time, Yos was the treasurer. However, Mr. Schmidt had an interest in finances and so had been serving as a treasurer for the past 5 years. So those are the elected positions that would typically be seen, and I would return it to you then for further action.
All right, thank you. Is there any discussion, Mr. Lehman?
Madam Chair, I'll nominate Commissioner Clay as president of the EDA.
Second.
I have a nomination and a second for Mr. Clay for president of the EDA.
Move
Mr.
a
Lehman?
white ballot vote.
Mr. Lehman has moved a white ballot vote,
Second.
second by Mr. Whiting. All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye. Opposed? The white ballot vote has confirmed Commissioner Clay as president of the EDA.
Probably didn't pass it to him then to conduct the rest of it.
Excellent. President Clay.
Thank you. It was a hard-fought campaign. Next would be accept nominations for vice president. Mr. Whiting,
I'll move Counselor Lehman as vice president.
are there any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Hearing none. I would entertain a motion.
So moved?
To cast a white ballot for
Yes.
Mr. Lehman,
Thank you for the help.
seconded by
I will second.
Commissioner Punt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Congratulations, Mr. Lehman. Treasurer. What would you suggest for treasurer? Anybody?
It could be
Tristan?
either Mr. Whiting or Mr. Tabkey. Nothing personal, but it's just, that's not the normal rotation.
Correct.
Mr. President, I have a question.
Go ahead.
Do we need a treasurer? Yeah. Oh, we do need to have one.
Statutorily, you do.
All right.
What are the typical duties?
It's pretty grueling.
Huh?
It's pretty grueling.
I would imagine.
Yeah.
Mr. Lehman.
I'll nominate Mr. Tabke to be consistent with the last 5 years, I guess.
Oh, okay. Are there any other nominations? Any other nominations? Any other nominations? Hearing none. Mr. Whiting.
I'll cast a white ballot for Mr. Tabke as treasurer.
Seconded by
I'll second.
Ms. Punt. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Ms. Punt, Mr. Tabke is now treasurer. Judy, you are going to be leaving us, unfortunately,
Can we subcontract?
before the end of the year.
Mr. President, what we would suggest is to reappoint her as secretary, and at such time as that her position is vacant, we can readdress it at that time.
Okay.
Mr. President.
And does that need to be voted on or just appointed?
I think a vote would be appropriate at this point.
Okay. Mr. Lehman.
Is there a way that we could use that appointment of Ms. Cox to keep her here beyond her retirement date?
Crossed my mind as well.
I don't know, chains in a chair might work or something.
That not being the case, I assume then you are making a motion
To nominate Judy Cox as the secretary.
Seconded by Mr. Whiting. Any other nominations? Other nominations, other nominations? All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Opposed? And Judy Cox continues to do a wonderful job as secretary. Is there any other new business not on the agenda that needs to come before our group? Seeing none, Mr. Lehman.
Motion to adjourn to Tuesday, February 21st.
Motion to adjourn, seconded by...
Seconded.
By Commissioner Tabke. All those in favor say aye.
Aye.
Opposed? We stand adjourned. Thank
All
you.
right. We reconvene the meeting at 8:17.
Pass it on.
Move on to item number 10A1, authorize hiring Springstead for compensation study. Ms. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. This agenda item asks the council to approve the hiring of Springstead, Inc. to complete a compensation study for the city. The compensation study would focus on the internal equity of the established pay for the city's full-time employees, as well as a few part-time positions. And trying to think about the easiest way to explain this concept. There we go.
I would suggest, first of all, making it clear to everybody the difference between a market study and a compensation study.
Yep, I'm gonna get at that. The main thing that we would be looking at in this compensation study is to look at the internal equity of the pay rates for the city's staff positions. What I've got on the screen up here is a copy of the city's non-union pay plan. And if I can get it to zone in. And our pay plan for non-union employees is divided into 13 pay grades. And if you look down here at pay grade 7, it provides a good example, because in here we have an accountant, a building inspector, the fire marshal, maintenance supervisors, and recreation supervisors. We have staff doing distinctly different jobs in distinctly different departments, but it somehow has been determined that they all belong in grade 7. They all have the same salary range for their positions. Their positions are of equal worth to the city, despite the variety of duties and responsibilities and backgrounds or paths that you might take to find yourself in one of those positions. So how did we come to decide that all of those positions belong in grade 7? Through a compensation study. The city's last compensation study was done approximately 10 years ago. It involves going through each job description in the city, making sure that it accurately reflects the position as it exists currently. It reviews the job duties of the position, the requirements as far as training and experience to hold the position, the amount of responsibility, autonomy, independence of the position, the amount of judgment required or exercised by the person in that position. The reason that we need to do an updated compensation study now is for a couple of reasons. The consulting firm that established our existing compensation structure went out of business approximately 3 years ago, coincided with the downturn of the economy. Because our employment was very stagnant at that point, we weren't adding new positions, we weren't changing a whole lot, we were kind of hunkered down from an employment standpoint. We could get by just fine without having this consulting firm on to evaluate our jobs and update our compensation plan. It could just exist as it was. However, as was just referenced by your last action, we have the retirement of the city clerk coming up, as well as several other changes and retirements pending within the city that will present an opportunity for us to relook at the structure of our organization, our staff positions, our departments. In order to have the freedom to really do that and write new job descriptions, create new positions with new and shifting sets of responsibilities, we need to be able to place them on the compensation study. State of Minnesota requires that we do that numerically with a quantitative analysis that assigns a points value to each position. And then we report that to them once every 3 years, and they make a ruling as to whether or not the city is in compliance with a state law known as the Pay Equity Act. So we can't just pick and choose, I think grade 7 looks good, or grade 5 or grade 9 is the right place for this position. We have to have the quantitative numerical analysis to back that up, and that's what hiring Springstead would do for us. So they will work with staff, they will work with supervisors on the job descriptions to make sure they're accurate, employees in each of those positions will have the opportunity to be heard and participate in this process. And staff will be back here, most likely not until fall, with the results of the compensation study to be implemented as part of our 2013 pay plan. So this is a lengthy process, not one that we're going to whip through and be back in front of you in a matter of weeks on, but we'd like to get going on it now. Funding for this project generically was included in the Human Resources budget for 2012, so the action before you tonight is to hire a specific consulting firm. And the staff received 3 proposals, one from a group called Fox Lawson, one from Keystone Compensation Group, and one from Springstead. The proposals have been reviewed by myself, the city administrator, and the finance director, and we are in agreement that the proposal from Springstead best meets the city's needs. Springstead is the city's financial advisor of record for a wide variety of financial matters and issues, so they are known to us and we are known to them. They are a well-established firm. They're not going to go anywhere or go out of business on us anytime soon. I feel safe in predicting. And additionally, the system that they propose to work with us on, once established, could be more easily maintained in-house and a little bit more independently, therefore less expensively without the consulting dollars once we get ourselves onto that system. So the total cost of the work proposed by them is $12,905.
All right, thank you. Any questions? Councilor Punt.
Is it accurate to also say that in doing this work, it would keep us in compliance with the Fair Labor Standards Act?
They will look at exempt versus non-exempt status and a variety, the kind of the big picture universe of compensation laws that we have to be in compliance with, yes.
Thank you.
Councilor Clay?
3 or 4 years ago when Springstead was here working to try to come up with, help us with a resolution for the BATC.
It would have been 2005, so it's actually getting on to 7 years now.
7 years ago?
But it was Springstead.
But that was,
Springstead.
They
did,
were the
yes.
firm that did that project, different
Are-
people there.
oh, I was gonna ask if any of the same people were available to, that already had some old, but still first-hand knowledge of the city, if they were available to work on this project. I suppose it's a hard question to answer.
Mayor, Councilor Clay, I think it's a different set of people because it's different information I'll be analyzing.
Councilor Lehman?
Mayor, at the time in '05, the BATC and the stuff that Springstead did for us was more of a allocating time by various departments to specific tasks, if I recall correctly, but that's pretty much what they were looking at that time, not necessarily compensation, but when you have cross departments doing different things within other departments, that how is the actual time billed out to the property department and so on and so forth, and tracked and allocated and stuff.
Okay. Councilor Clay, you look like you have something else you would like to say.
Nope.
All right.
Just a blank stare.
All right. Any other questions at all? All right, I think we're ready for a motion. Councilor Lehman?
I'll move to authorize the hiring of Springstead's Inc. to conduct a compensation study as outlined in their proposal from August 9th, 2011. Total cost not to exceed $13,000.
I'll second.
Seconded by Councilor Punt. Any discussion? All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. Thank you, Ms. Whitley. You're fast, already over there. Wow. 10E1, consider applying for state and federal funds for route of regional significance project. I'm sorry.
Yeah, let's look
D1.
at
I apologize. I got myself ahead. That was not good. 10D1, continue discussion of Shakopee, Mdewakanton, and Sioux community application to have land in Shakopee placed in trust. Mr. Leek.
Thank you, Mayor, members of the council. You can go ahead and renumber it, and I'll let Mr. Loney make the presentation, and you won't have to hear from me. What staff intends to do this evening is to provide you with an update on the comments and questions that you raised at the last meeting in the discussion about how to posture yourselves relative to the 2 trust land applications currently at the Bureau of Indian Affairs for lands in the city of Shakopee. I will take some time to talk about the Karcheri issue and how you might position yourself relative to that, what the alternatives are, and then what staff is looking for from you as direction as to, number one, whether or not you want to file comments either in support or opposition to the two trust applications, what the nature of those comments should be, and what posture you want to take relative to that Karcheri decision. So if you remember, you had 10 questions or items that were raised. The first one was, can the city get a comprehensive plan from the tribe? Since we met last with you, we had a meeting on Tuesday of last week involving the lands manager for the Shakopee, Metawankinton Sioux, Stan Ellison, as well as one of their legal representatives from the Blue Dog firm, Greg Paulson. I believe it's incorrectly noted as Olson in your report this evening. In that meeting, Mr. Ellison indicated that they do have a draft 2011 comprehensive plan. It is primarily map-based. He subsequently went to the Business Council to ask if it was okay to share that information. They approved that. We had a series of meetings on Friday afternoon. One of them was between the city of Shakopee and representatives of the SMSC, and they shared some of that draft information in map form with us. One of the issues we talked about was, and we'll get into it in more detail later, where potential future acquisitions might be, what the land uses are. And my understanding from our meeting on Friday is that Mr. Ellison is going to provide us with updated maps that we can share relative to what their plans are. Keep in mind that those are not currently adopted by the community, but they are the draft plans that they're working with. I'll just mention briefly that the second meeting we'll touch upon later on in your list. What are the current land uses for tribal lands in Shakopee? Well, as you know, with respect to the two sets of parcels that are subject to the applications that are currently before the Bureau of Indian Affairs, there are basically two uses. For the former Shutrip parcels, it's agricultural use. Specifically, we understood from Mr. Ellison that they have about a 10-year research project related to materials that can be grown and utilized in their biomass efforts in connection with CODA, and that's what the former Shutrip parcel is intended to be used for. The smaller parcel, the Stemmer parcel, is about 2.5 acres. Part of that actually is underneath existing Dakota Parkway, and so there's not a great deal of use that's intended to be made of that parcel as we understand it from the application. Now, with respect to the other parcels that they own, there's a range of uses. There were a number of parcels that were indicated for long-term agricultural use. For example, two of the larger parcels, which they own in fee on Marshall Road, which you might be aware of. And I didn't bring a map with me, but we can share that at another time, as well as the Shutrip parcel. There are some areas in the land that was taken into trust by the BIA most recently that are designated for enterprise uses, for some drainage uses, and the potential extension of roadways across 83, as well as some potential governmental uses and agricultural uses. So those are the range of uses. Now, a secondary discussion we had, and maybe I should hold on until one of the next issues. Sorry about that. Number 3, what are the tribe's future land acquisition needs so that the city can use that information to best plan for the infrastructure needs? Well, what we heard from Mr. Ellison is that they have in mind acquisitions to connect parcels that they've already purchased or are in trust of about 100 acres or so in the foreseeable future. The maps that they were sharing with us in their draft plan are up to 2050 land use plan maps. So they didn't show substantial acquisitions. We talked generally about what parcels might make sense from their perspective to connect parcels they already own. We did, I think, reconfirm in the conversation that the intent is with all of those parcels that they would eventually be put into trust for their use. That's long been the policy of the SMSC to make beneficial use of property when it's in trust and they have full control and sovereignty over it. Number 4, how does the tribe feel the land uses proposed for the two parcels meet with the intent of the Indian Reorganization Act And as I state in the memo, I think it was represented that the community really doesn't feel that it needs to demonstrate a specific need for those parcels under the IRA. Number 5, how much of the power which is generated by Coda Energy is needed for use by the tribe? How much is sold back to the grid? What is the percentage of the biomass that would be produced for Coda from the Shutrip parcel versus the energy plant's total needs? And I know that we have Bill Rudnicki here from the community this evening. If I get any of this wrong, I'm sure he can set me straight. But our understanding is that right now, RAR malting uses all of the heat and approximately a third of the energy that's generated by Coda, which is, of course, a joint project of the community and RAR malting. The majority of the energy, we understand, is currently sold back to the grid. In terms of what percentage would come from the Shutrip parcel, it's a relatively small percentage. The general calculation that was shared with us was that it takes about 10,000 acres of land to provide the biomass for the Coda Energy project to be continually supplied. In addition, we know that we'll be having some conversations about a potential drying facility here in Shakopee that the tribe hopes to construct to dry some of the materials that are available to them to use at Coda. Number 6, the council wants to make sure that the land development environmental impacts are fully reviewed. I think in regard to that, the city's interest was noted, but there wasn't a specific response with respect to the uses for the parcels that are under consideration right now. The comment was made at the last meeting that the city should follow the county's lead regarding Carcieri, or the Carcieri decision that was made at the Supreme Court. I think our discussions on Tuesday with Mr. Paulson and Mr. Ellison basically indicated a couple of things. Since that decision by the Supreme Court, there have been some decisions and interpretations by the Bureau of Indian Affairs on how it applies. And it is both the tribe and the Bureau of Indian Affairs regional office belief that this tribe is subject to their jurisdiction and can indeed take land into trust for them despite that Carcieri decision. So they have a good faith position based on the history of their community that says to them that Carcieri doesn't apply to land trust for the SMSC. As a staff, we believe it would take a great deal of research into the specifics of Carcieri in this tribe to demonstrate otherwise. I think the comment was made that the position taken by the county in its 3 letters regarding the applications here and in Prior Lake simply raised the issue in a sort of superfluous way and really didn't do much in the way of analysis about whether or not it really applies in this specific case. Moving on to number 8 for the moment, does the tribe have a number of acres that it needs for long-term planning? Again here, it was indicated to us that the anticipated purchases are about 100 acres or so. Obviously, that can change based on changes in their council government, changes in the need of their tribe. The analysis of their needs is based largely on a study that was done back in the 2005 time period for their population growth within the community. And if that were to change, that might change the specific needs that they feel that they have for land. But at this point, they don't contemplate any very significant or aggressive acquisitions other than those sort of infill parcels that they refer to. Do the tribe's development needs factor in their non-trust lands? At the time, there wasn't specific discussion of this question on Tuesday. I think we had a little more discussion of that on the Friday meeting between the city and representatives of the community. And I think it does take into account both their trust and fee lands in terms of addressing what they see as their long-term needs or desires for development. And it was also mentioned, I believe by it was Councillor Clay in summary, that there's an interest in an ongoing joint commission, including the county, Prior Lake, Shakopee, and the tribe, to look at a variety of issues, including environmental and transportation needs, and that we should meet to discuss mutual goals on an ongoing basis. Following the city's meeting with Mr. Ellison and Mr. Rudnicki, There was a meeting with representatives of the county, City of Prior Lake, and ourselves, specifically to discuss that. And Mr. Ellison and Mr. Rudnicki came to the meeting with a proposed short memorandum of understanding, which we spent some time discussing. It was circulated to us at the end of last week for all of the parties who were part of that meeting to review and comment on. Some of those comments have come in. I personally have done a review and sent my comments on. They were not very substantive. It provides a very general framework for operation and does contemplate an ongoing effort, and it would come back to you if we get to the point of having it considered for adoption. It contemplates meetings at least quarterly, but it also talks about the need for some technical work groups that would develop. The thought is that it would address not only long-term planning issues, but ongoing or smaller service delivery issues, such as who's going to plow a roadway that may be adjacent to trust land or fee land owned by the tribe. How do we best share resources on a variety of issues? So the intent, I think, was by the end of this week for everyone who was part of that second meeting on Friday to provide their comments. I think they've heard now from the attorney at Prior Lake, from Mr. Shelton at the county, and from me at the city of Shakopee. And as I said, there have not been any real substantive comments on the form of that agreement. So that seems to be moving forward. Let me talk about Carcieri for a moment. At the Tuesday meeting, and I should note that the BIA staff that was there represented that in their view that meeting is what they called a good faith meeting required by the consent decree that was entered into by the City of Shakopee and the Bureau of Indian Affairs. My belief from their comments is that they don't believe any additional meetings are required, although they encourage the kinds of meetings that we had on Friday to continue. I did specifically in that meeting ask if we were having substantive discussions that were moving forward, if we might be able to seek an extension to the comment period. The initial indication was that in their view the deadline at this point was still January 31st if the city wanted to file comments. And I'm not very confident that they would back off of that position, although we did not formally in writing request that extension. As I said, with respect to Carcieri, we know that the SMSC has a pretty well researched and thought out position on whether or not the Carcieri decision applies to them and to applications for land to be put in trust for them. I think staff is of the opinion after consultation that it would take a lot of research to mount that effort to make a good faith argument that it does apply. And we certainly heard in the Tuesday meeting that that is really a bright line issue for the SMSC, that if the city were to raise it as a substantive objection to these two land trust applications, that it would have an impact on our own ongoing relationship and discussions. I think you have a number of options relative to Carcieri. One of them would be to oppose these requests, in part based on the Carcieri holding by the Supreme Court in 2008. Again, that would take a substantial amount of research into the issue, and as I said, may well interfere with the kinds of substantive discussions that we've begun so far in a memorandum of understanding. The city could at this point acquiesce in these two requests. As you know, the City of Prior Lake did take the position on a split vote that they were not going to file comments and were not going to oppose the acquisition in their community. In doing so, you might reserve the Carcieri issue to raise it in connection with other requests. You might defer the issue. As was noted, the county has raised it in its comment letters and perhaps would more fully develop it if for some reason the discussions we're having ultimately didn't bear fruit, or there was some basis on which the City Council felt the decision ultimately to take the lands into trust was flawed by the BIA. You could, of course, raise it at that point in an appeal, although there would be no underlying record in the proceedings so far regarding that. And finally, we could continue to have the discussions, negotiate further about that memorandum of understanding and the consultation process that we started last week, and request an extension in the comment period from the Bureau of Indian Affairs. And I'm not sure that we would be successful, but that certainly is something that you have an option to do. So we're asking for direction from you as to whether or not you want to file comments. If you do, whether they are in opposition to, neutral about, or in support of the trust applications for the two sets of parcels. And whether or not at this point you want to posture yourself relative to Carcieri aggressively in the case of these applications, or simply to reserve the issue, or to be silent on the issue and leave open the possibility of raising it on appeal or with future applications. And if Mr. McNeil or Mr. Thompson have additional details they'd like to add to that brief summary, I'm sure that they will. And with that, I'll open ourselves up to questions from you.
Mr. McNeil?
Mr. Mayor and members of the council, I think Michael's done a very good job of explaining what has happened over the 2 weeks since we last met to talk about this. He indicated that you can go for or in opposition, or a neutral position might be to provide the information which the BIA has been looking for in terms of land use and tax impacts, and then possibly, if you choose to do this, hold and reserve any comments regarding Carcieri for future applications. So beyond that, we're open for questions.
Councilor Clay?
A couple questions. Do we know of anybody else, who else or where else in the country that somebody might be doing the research on Carcieri that you were speaking of?
I believe the Cowlitz tribe in Washington has had that issue raised in connection with the trust application or applications that they made. I don't know the specifics of their fact situation, but I believe that's one where the issue has been raised as well.
Does that become public information eventually?
There is information which is public. I have read some of the articles that relate to it on some of the news sources that focus on Native American issues, and Cowlitz continues to reappear. I don't know at what stage in terms of a formal challenge they're at this point. We'd have to look into that.
One more?
But again, I would say that that may substantively raise the issue, but it may be fact-specific to that tribe as opposed to this community. So the question really is, do you want to raise the issue at all? If you don't want to, do you want to reserve it? Do you want to reserve it noting that the county has raised it at least in a preliminary way in their comments?
Councilor Clay?
If the Mdewakanton community agreed with us, would the regional office, would they be inclined to give us a 2-month extension to this?
I don't know if Mr. McNeil is better prepared to prognosticate on that than I am. It was helpful when the community joined in our request for a further extension to January 31st. I didn't get the sense from the staff that was there that they were terribly open to a further extension, that they viewed the meeting that we held as what was required by the consent decree in their view. And while it was beneficial that we continue having discussions about an ongoing process, I didn't get the sense that they would grant an extension for the comments.
Mr. McNeil?
That would be accurate. He's adequately described what I understand.
All right. Councilor Lehman?
Well, Mr. Mayor, it seems that the loss of tax revenue has been an ongoing issue for years and years and years. As more property comes off the tax rolls and goes into tribal trust hands. And we still do have the land use conflict issues until we have a point in time to where we actually have a comp plan from the tribal government to put over top of ours to see what we're both doing, so we're not building one way and they're building the opposite way with two different uses and non-compatible uses. So we still have them two issues in front of us. If I heard right, we have a 2011 comp plan from the tribal government.
We have seen the maps for the draft 2011 comprehensive plan that they prepared. There are some revision to those maps that staff at the SMSC was going to be making, and then they will be sharing those with us. Again, it's not yet adopted by the community, and I would note, if you're not aware of it, their general election is today, so we'll know who their business council members are tomorrow and whether or not there might be any change in their approach. The current chairman was supportive of the memorandum of understanding discussions that we were having and sharing that information. And of course, the business council had given Mr. Ellison permission to share the information with us in draft form, but not adopted at this point.
Councilor Lehman?
Mayor, it seems like a 2011 is like out of date. What I'm kind of looking for is a future plan. Like our
Well, when I
2030.
say 2011, and I think I alluded to it, one of the maps that we saw, and they did their mapping, I believe, in 5-year increments, goes all the way out to what the land uses they propose to 2050
Okay.
would be.
All right.
Mr. McNeil?
Mr. Mayor and Councilor Lehman, one of the positive things that we took away from the meeting on Friday was the desire through this memorandum of understanding to have a steering committee or whatever it's going to be called to talk about those nuts and bolts sorts of things such as utilities and transportation and land use and the things that affect both the tribal government and us as neighbors in terms of how do we best put our utilities so that if we need to get from one side of tribally owned land to the other to extend, that we might be able to coordinate those sorts of things. I think the thing that I took away from the 2015, 2020, and all the way up to the 2050 land use maps was that there really isn't a substantive change from what's there now. Obviously, as they get more of their tribal members getting to be of age and therefore will be needing to have residential properties on that, it's not that much in conflict with what we've seen here. We think if we can get the steering committee together that we'll be able to, I think, more freely share information that will be a benefit to both sides. So with that, that was, I think, a very positive that we came away from that meeting on Friday.
And I would add to that, I think I spoke to it earlier, but remember that we had the meeting between tribal representatives, ourselves, and BIA representatives on Tuesday morning. And by Friday, we were in a meeting with the community, with Prior Lake, with Scott County, where it was one of the community staff who brought forward a model for this MOU and really was talking about aggressively making sure that we could move forward to get the MOU to the various boards and councils to look at and adopt so that process could move forward. So I think that's a very positive development as well.
Councilor Clay?
You know, just how much farther or quickly we can move ahead with that memorandum, I think has a lot to do with how I feel about what our direction to you tonight should be on this issue. Maybe Mr. Rudnicki, or is it Mr. Olson sitting next to you? No, Mr. Rudnicki. You're Mr. Rudnicki, and you are? Oh, so you're not together. All right, then never mind.
There's just a slight resemblance between him and Mr. Paulson from the Blue Dog firm. Mr. Rudnicki, of course, is the tribal administrator, and you heard from him at the last meeting.
Then a question for him is, do you think it would be beneficial or possible to get another extension for a month or two?
Mayor and Councilmember Clays. I have not proposed that question to the governing body that would make that decision. But I do want to go back to the point, it was 2 weeks ago that we were here, and we have made some significant strides in putting this agreement together. And so I'm pleased at that, and as Michael Leake announced, we have a new council, two similar, both the chairman and the secretary treasurer that will come back, and then we have a new vice chairman that will be in play.
Do
I'm
we
not sure.
know who they are yet?
Yes. Chairman Crooks, Stan Crooks, will be the chairman, and the vice chairman, which will take office on January 31st at noon, is Charlie Vig. He's currently the chairman of the board of the gaming enterprise right now, and then the secretary treasurer, which is Keith Anderson, will be won re-election. So 2 of the 3, and I feel that we have a good team that will be able to work with the city.
Their
But
term, that term
their,
is for
their
how
term
many
of
years?
office is 4 years.
4?
But going back to your question, I'm not prepared to give you a response. But I think both you and I shared the same concern about putting together this working group. And, you know, I've seen the comments from some of the staff and the county already. So we had that meeting on the 3rd of January, and we had the first look at the draft of this document last Friday within a week and a half. So I think we're making some positive gains. I think it's really, you know, I think that's the way that we want to work it. So, but I apologize, I don't have an answer for your question.
What are you hoping to gain out of delaying months?
Understand the MOU.
Yeah, I think there's a lot of potential there that we just need a little bit more time to work on and get a feel for.
And how would that affect what we do tonight?
Well, I think it would have a bearing on exactly what kind of
Any kind of land use
comments
conflicts.
we want to bring back or make by this January 31st deadline.
Okay. Councilor Lehman?
It could have a huge impact on future land use conflicts, because we'd have a process to communicate, to know who's going in what direction and what their intentions are.
I agree. Yeah, absolutely.
Mayor, members of the council, I would note that the comments that would be sought by the BIA are specific to the parcels that are the subject of those applications. And I agree that there are substantial questions of what the impacts are for the balance of the roughly 3,000 acres that they have in fee. I think it's about 1,600 that's actually in fee between the two cities might have. And so one of the threshold questions for you might be with respect to the factors that we would typically comment on, land use conflicts for these specific parcels, the impact on taxation, which is related there in their application and was also related in the county's letters, and I think they're very close in terms of what the tax impact was that was indicated. If it's sufficient enough that in the case of these parcels, you want to comment in objection to taking the land into trust, or if you want to make comment about what those potential impacts are, not specifically objecting in this case, but reserving those larger issues for other trust land applications that may come forward. I think that's one of the questions that's kind of in front of you for discussion.
Mr. Leake, if I can ask, what, being new to this process, if we were to comment with objection, what sort of mechanism would that trigger, or what would happen from that point moving forward?
Well, in brief summary, it's our understanding this is the one opportunity we would have to comment. The Midwest Regional Office could make a decision to take the land into trust. The next step, if the city wanted to pursue objections to that acquisition into trust would be to make an appeal to the, forget the precise title, but it is a Board of Appeals within the Department of the Interior specifically, and then ultimately the appeal would be in federal district court. So at some point, if the land were taken into a trust and you had objected to it being taken into trust, you'd have to make a determination as to whether or not you wanted to make an appeal of the decision by the regional office of the BIA to take it into trust.
And so then if we if we comment with just our opinion in there, it simply gets our opinion into the record, and if we don't comment at all, it simply doesn't, they don't take any of our opinions moving
If no
forward.
comment is filed by the city at all, then the decision is made on the record in front of the regional office, which largely consists of the applications of the SMSC to have the land taken into trust, with the exception, of course, of the comment letters that were submitted by Scott County, as they submitted comment letters for all 3 acquisitions.
All right. Councilor Lehman, I saw your hand go up earlier.
Yeah, well, obviously, we never want land to come out of fee and go into trust because we lose the tax revenue. The question I had to follow that is, the larger parcel in this application is to be used for growing stuff, agricultural, basically, for biomass. I guess I don't understand why that has to be in trust. From my perspective, I understand from their perspective that from their perspective it's a sovereignty issue and that's just what they want to do. But from our perspective, it's a loss of tax generating dollars. Granted, it's a different tax rate as agricultural, but it would still remain agricultural.
It would still remain agricultural, yes.
Okay, and I thought the land use that we originally had for that parcel was residential next to the school.
That's correct. That area is generally guided within the city's plans for residential use, low-density residential use.
Okay.
And if I can comment on your observation, I think you're right. And I think we had some discussion around that point. Why does it need to be in trust? And I think the answer is, you understand the rationale that you've heard and seen before from the community, and that is that they feel the need to consolidate and have under their sovereign control the lands without necessarily having to engage in complicated cooperative agreements relative to each of those parcels of land. I don't know if Mr. Rudnicki wants to comment, but there is, if you will, a fundamental viewpoint that the community has espoused for quite a long time about using their land in trust because of the benefits it gives them in terms of exercising their sovereignty. Could they farm it while it's held in fee? Obviously they could. They own lands in fee that are being utilized right now, but that's not their long-term desire for those other reasons.
Could I give an example? Sure. Yes, Mr. Rudnicki.
Mayor and council member Lehman, one example, and it actually happened on the land that's in city of Shakopee. Little history about our compost, our organic recycling facility. We started a facility probably about 10 years ago, and it was located on one of our trust properties. Currently where our public works facility sits on 42 and Dakota Parkway. We had a small site there. Idea was for the residents and people to bring some compostable materials there. We turned it, we used that site. 2006, 2007, when we built our public works facility, we had to move our compost site. Logical location was a piece of property that we had on County Road 42, right across the street from it, just to north of 42. I think it might be either on the boundary, it's either close in Shakopee or Prior Lake. I'm not sure which area it is. It's probably in Prior Lake if you're not familiar with it. That was probably about a 10-acre site, and what we wanted to do was expand it. And we ran into the fact that the county had some regulations that we wouldn't allow us to do that site there. So when our land was placed into trust, the 600 acres, we moved that site from the County Road 42 site to the site where it's the organic recycling facility where it's currently located. I'm not here really to tell you the details because I'm not that familiar exactly, but there was a couple issues where for us to expand that site, it was not able to, so we moved it to the other site. I know that's not really answering your question, but I'm trying to give you an example of sometimes of how we can do things on trust property versus non-trust property, and that was a good thing. I think everyone will be pleased with the organic recycling facility. It's been in place for 6 or 8 months. A number of the governments have already used it, but I just wanted to let you know that sometimes there's that flexibility out there. Okay.
Sorry, on those same lines, a question that comes up to me quite often is that this land goes into trust, what keeps if the community would like to build a compost facility where they want it? That's great, but what keeps the community from building a
medical
900
waste container facility?
Yeah, anything
Okay.
that
Well,
wouldn't necessarily fit with what next to our residential areas if there is a gigantic hotel that goes in or things like that.
Right.
What mechanisms are involved to keep those kinds of things from happening, to keep our quality of life where we want it to be?
Mayor Tapke, that's a good question, and I would have to say that probably the best thing that has happened to the tribe is that when we build things, example was the last time when I was here, I mentioned that we built a wastewater treatment facility. That wastewater treatment facility is located on County Road 82 and Orion Road. That facility is within 600 feet of a tribal member. So let's just say we didn't build it right. We didn't have the air quality systems. It has these huge systems that clean the air, and it was really smelly. Guess who would be complaining to me? Not the residents, but I would have tribal members complaining. And I think if you've and that's probably one of the nice things that the tribe has going for it is the membership, and they're gonna be here for the rest of their lives and their generations and generations after that. They're gonna be living next to this, so we try to take that into consideration. A lot of things that we do, we try to do it because we have the owners there, and the owners raise questions each and every day. I have roughly about 100 vehicles that that drive in our fleet, and guess what? I hear from a tribal member when they see one of our vehicles driving too quickly, or maybe they're driving too slowly, or maybe they're in the wrong spot. So I get this daily feedback, and from that standpoint, can I predict what's going to happen years down the road? No, but when you have people that live next to the business, they get concerned about it, and they want to make sure that it's operated and above standard. I mean, we do a lot out there, and from surveillance and stuff like that probably is not required by law, but because of that ownership, and everyone talks about the tribe. I mean, they live there, they see it, they have expectations as well. So, so we try to incorporate that in everything that we do.
Right, well, that still doesn't allay people's fears, like on the Shoe parcel, for example. If you wanted to build a hotel there or something like that, you had mentioned to me at one point you weren't able to do that
on the Shoe property,
or not necessarily on Shoe property, but on lands that are right next to homes. Am I incorrect in saying that there's some mechanism that doesn't allow that to happen, that you'd have to go back to the BIA or something like that to do that? Am I not remembering correctly?
I'm not sure.
I can
Okay.
probably clarify this for you.
Please do.
Correct me if I'm wrong. Where'd Mr. Lee go?
He's back there.
Okay. If the land is in fee, there's various restrictions by other entities of government that need to be followed. If the land is in trust, you're exempt from any other form of government. And you don't, basically like your scenario on the compost site, fee land, the county probably would have let you expand, but you would have had to have some kind of a permit process, some kind of requirements would have had to been met. When it's into a trust status, that government has no authority over that property, and just your sovereign nation has the authority over that property. And the controls. Correct. Is that a true statement?
I think that's generally true. I think the other thing that you may have been talking around the edges of is that roughly 600 acres of land that was taken into trust was taken for non-gaming purposes. And there are differences in the process of taking land into trust for gaming versus non-gaming processes. And I believe it's fair to say that there are restrictions on the community waking up one day and deciding in one of their general council and then business council meetings that suddenly they're going to change the use to a gaming use because the land wasn't taken into trust for that purpose. So there are some restrictions, not necessarily related to whether it's used for tribal government purposes versus a hotel. I think the authority exists within the community to change uses in that way. But there are some restrictions on non-gaming versus gaming uses.
Thank you. That
when
was
the
what I
lands
was
are taken into
Or
trust.
non-compatible land
Attempting.
uses side by side where you have the
Now,
trust.
the other comment I'd make, and it goes back to the broad overview here, is that part of the city's request over the last now 16 years has been to have a process by which to discuss the potential issues created in a circumstance like the hypothetical you pose. So that memorandum of understanding that we're talking about would presumably provide the venue in which the community, the city, the county, city of Prior Lake, if it's in Prior Lake, could discuss what the implications are and hopefully address any potential issues through that process. Not to say that that group will have any authority over what the decision is, nor that you'd have any authority over that decision, but it would provide a way to work through those issues, hopefully, and identify them early.
Wonderful. Councilor Punt, you've been quiet.
Well, just a brief comment then. Having that memorandum of understanding and getting into that situation where we can have that open communication is one thing. But I don't think that it constitutes us not being opposed to, not having the ability to show that we're opposed to the current applications. So that's just my, I mean, I
That's
feel
certainly
like
a
those are
decision by the city
separate.
council, what
Those seem to be
position you want to
separate.
take
Now,
on the current applications.
Could our comment about an application that is against the acquisition be viewed in a negative way by the community? Of course. But an ongoing dialogue, no matter what the circumstance around the land acquisition is desired, based on the fact that no one's going anywhere. We need to continue to try to work together.
Councilor Whiting?
I'd ask for your opinion, but I think the direction with the current direction that's getting, the feelings are getting better. The teams are working together better lately as opposed to in the past. Would opposing, let's say on the understanding that we oppose it because of the loss of revenue, because of the taxes, would that create the friction like it was in the past?
I guess that's not a question that I can answer with an opinion.
I
You
mean-
might want to ask Mr. Rudnicki if he has an opinion. What I do know from our discussions, or what I believe I know, is that if that opposition was based on the Supreme Court decision in Carcieri, it could well have an impact on those ongoing discussions. Were you to file comments that said, we don't think it's consistent with our land use intent and there will be conflicts, there is a loss of revenue, whatever the other factors might be, whether or not that would affect the ongoing discussions, I guess I don't know. My sense is that it's not as critical as that other basis for opposition, but maybe Mr. Rudnicki has an opinion.
Okay. Councilor Lehman?
Mayor, I'm still generally opposed to trust because we lose the tax generation, and my concern is the future conflict of uses as a trust status on the property. Only because we don't know what the use is gonna be. If we had a comp plan that, you know, we might know what it would be, we don't, but then again, there's nothing that, unlike our form of government, if we have a comprehensive plan filed with our higher levels of government, we can't change it without an amendment. On their form of government, they make their comprehensive plan and they also change it. So there's really nothing to hold that other than their word. And I'm not saying your word is bad or anything, but the area of this parcel is around the school, and you know, I'd hate to see the future use be totally incompatible with what's already there because it's a school. So a field obviously isn't going to harm the children out there, but that doesn't say that in the future, if it's in a trust status and there's no controls other than the sovereign nation controls, that they don't decide to put something there that could be a huge conflict. So, you know, I still want to keep working on a memorandum of understanding and try to get through this to make the future issues a lot easier to deal with. But at the same token, I mean, I'm not gonna back away from my true beliefs of the amount of land that they have, the economic situation they're in, and the fact is, the more that comes off our tax rolls, the harder it gets for us. And that's just a fact. And I can, you know, my heart tells me that, and my stomach tells me the same. So that's where I'm at. As far as the Supreme Court decision, you know, I'm not gung-ho to fight that battle right at the moment. You know, I could reserve that for a future date if need be and see where it goes with other entities. So that's kind of where I'm at.
Yeah, I agree with everything you just said right there. I think what we need to do, and you guys tell me your thoughts as well, is kind of break this up into two mini discussions within our discussion here. And one, do we want to comment? Is this something we feel strongly enough that we need to put comment of some sort out there, or let it go without commenting? And if we do want to comment, what those comments should be. Does everybody feel that's a way to go? Okay, so let's start with the first portion of this. Do we, as a council, feel that there is significant reason to comment at this point? Who wants to start up? Councilor Punt.
I believe that we should comment and oppose the current applications. I don't believe we need to go down the road of the Supreme Court decision. I think it's just basically outlining the facts and how that will affect our the future of our community, and put those concerns out there. I mean, it's just being factual and being honest, and you know, commemorating that in a letter of opposition.
All right, so Councilor Punt, you are commenting and respectfully oppose? Is that the best way to put it? Councilor Lehman, are you along those same lines?
I am, for the reasons that I stated: the loss of tax revenue, the potential for conflicting land uses, and I don't see the need for land that's going to be utilized in an agricultural purpose for a biofuel to need a trust status, to be honest with you.
Okay. Councilor
How
Clay?
do you feel about the Carcieri issue?
It seems to me that you know, I don't have a problem letting somebody else fight the fight and seeing where it goes, but boy, there's a lot of case history in Shakopee and our Mid-Wacaton going back a ways, and you know, I just don't know if this is the right time for it, to be honest with you.
So you are agreeing with, basically with punt?
Yes, I am. I would reserve that option to pursue that at a later date.
Councilor Clay?
I would concur with both of them.
Beautiful. Councilor Whiting?
Same thing with the reservation on Cartier.
Okay.
I respect the tribe. They've been here. I believe they've always been here, and but we need to take a look at that. Let the law run itself out at someone else's dime.
Yeah, I
We can always
agree
come
with
back
it.
to it.
Yeah, exactly. It's always there. If things don't go well, if relationships sour, as things happen, I believe it can always be there. But I think it's well within our rights to respectfully oppose this and say that it's not concurrent with what we want to do, and we want to work together, but there are things that we don't agree on all the time, and I think it's okay for that to move forward with the relationship. I don't agree with everything my wife does, but we're still able to go forward with our relationship and go that way. So I think that is okay. Do we need a motion on this, or
That would
just
be helpful.
staff? So would someone like to put that in the form of a motion? Councilor Lehman?
Mayor, I'll make a motion directing staff to prepare the comments regarding the application for trust on the 2 parcels, consistent with the council discussion, which was to oppose the current application based on tax revenue losses, potential future land use conflicts, and the lack of need to have the land in trust status for its intended use, for biomass use, and to reserve the city's right at this time to pursue the, how do you pronounce that?
Cartier.
Cartier court ruling.
Okay, do we have a second for that?
Second.
Second by Councilor Punt.
Mr. Chairman, just to clarify the motion, when you say reserve Cartier, you mean reserve it for a future trust application, not reserve it for this one. So you're not objecting to this trust application on that basis?
Correct.
Okay.
All right, any discussion with regards to this? Can I do friendly amendments? Is that something that the mayor can do? Oh, nope.
You can do them friendly or unfriendly.
Okay. I would like to add Councilor Lehman into the word respectfully, because I think that's important in with our relationship moving forward, is that we respectfully oppose the application.
Well, I think I'm respectful to all levels of government, regardless of whether I use the word respect or not.
Mr. Mayor,
Yep.
I think the letter can be drafted with that in it. I mean,
Okay.
that doesn't need to be actually part of the motion.
Okay.
It's going to come from staff, and we'll
Withdrawn then.
wordsmith it
You get paid
appropriately.
that letter, though.
Thank you.
So just put respect. That
All
saves
right.
a couple bucks.
Any additional discussion with this? Councilor Whiting?
I think many of us received some, a few different emails on this subject, and one of the things that came up was Section 5 of the Indian Reorganization Act, whether that was constitutional. Is that any discussion we want to talk about, reserving that or moving on with that, leaving that?
Let's keep discussion to the motion at hand
Okay.
for now. We can bring that up after the motion is
right.
acted upon. All right, any discussion pertaining to the motion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, passes unanimously. Councilor Whiting, would you like to bring that up now?
Yeah, just whether or not that should be reserved in some of the comments. There may be some lawsuits whether or not that's constitutional or not, the right for the Secretary of Interior to take land into trust for any reason without any basis of facts or findings. Is that something we want to discuss? Or anybody else?
Mr. Mayor, Members of Council.
Mr. Thompson?
The only basis for your objection on this application is going to be what you just said. You don't need to formally reserve other arguments for future cases. You have that authority anytime another application comes in. So, you can certainly address that. I mean, my understanding is you're saying if another one comes in, we want to reserve our right to contest it on that grounds. Yes, you can do that. You don't need to tell the BIA that now on this application. You can wait for the next one to come in.
Very good. Any other discussion on the topic? Councilor Lehman?
Mayor, I just wanted to thank the tribal government representatives for being here tonight.
Absolutely. Well done. All right. All right. D1 is finished. Item 10E1, consider applying for state and federal funds for route of regional significance project. Mr. Loney.
Thank you, Mayor and members of the council. Recently, we have received notice of potential additional funds from the state and federal governments on potential projects for the city of Shakopee. I'd like to go through a couple of these and see if, one, if you want to go with these opportunities or not. There's two of them here. The first one is what's known as a routes of regional significance. And I'm just going to show a couple of drawings so people at home and yourself can orientate. This is County Road 69 on the bottom of the page. 169 is fairly on the east side here. The old mall area, Town Square Mall, is over here. 69 continues. There's a little piece of Verling Drive built here. Verling Drive is built all the way from this point all the way back through town. So there's a little segment missing. It's a gap. There's area in here that's what we would consider excess right-of-way. It's been held by MnDOT because of the 169 project all these years, kind of waiting to see what's going to happen with the 41 river crossing. We pretty much know what's going to happen there. So eventually this will become excess right-of-way. And as I discussed this with the MnDOT representative who's handling the Route of Regional Significant program, thought this would be a very good project. So I pursued it a little bit more because this potentially could give us some funding source. I did say it's $500,000 per project, not $5 million. There's $10 million total that the state had dedicated in the bonding bill for this type of program. The reason this has come up is everybody with this drawing, hopefully it's a concept drawing that we've been given by the consultant for the 169 interchange. And this is a concept that has been pretty much promoted. I don't know where the project is at right now, but we've had some open houses, and the county and this has received $12 million to build this interchange in 2014. This program of Route of Regional Significance that's shown right here, this gap again, if we were to proceed with this application, we'd have to have a letting in June of 2013. That's how the program works. One more map. We did do some work in 1997. At one time, Cub Foods was looking at moving into the town square area, and we were looking at getting this excess right-of-way as part of a pass-through program with the state, and we could have made this work. We had a design actually done here showing connections to these two parcels, and this is about 25 acres of potential residential property. So with that, I pursued it a little further, talking to the MnDOT Reconveyance Office, and essentially, well, let me backtrack a little bit. On this program, what the state would pay for would be street improvements and storm sewer improvements. They would not pay for engineering, right-of-way, sanitary sewer, water main, trails, or sidewalks. Those would have to be picked up either by the city, or normally what we would do with a brand new road in this case, we would assess them to adjacent benefiting properties. Talking to MnDOT, the Reconveyance Office is probably not set up quite yet to do this, and they certainly do not want any assessments. The assessments would be in excess of probably $200,000-$300,000. We probably could get $300,000-$400,000 to build a road, so it's kind of like a 50-50. My initial approach to this potential application would be that we would get the money to build a road, assess the project, assess the properties, so the city would have no tax money, none of our state aid money would be involved. It would be 100% paid. Without being able to assess, I am a little bit leery of moving ahead with that application. The other portion of this, of my memo, is that there could be a very high potential. I think the governor announced today another $750 million bonding bill. So there's all the potential of funding again for this type of project in the future. So with that, I'm basically saying on this particular, I want you to be aware of the potential project in this area, the potential excess right-of-way, and the potential economic development in that area. But I also would say, at this point, we should probably wait on that application. I did go out and get a proposal, what it would cost to do. The proposal is $2,000. But based on all the facts that I've been able to gather in the last few days, it's potentially we should probably not go forward. Questions?
Councilor Lehman.
Mayor, Mr. Loney, is it possible that, let's do a hypothetical. We build this piece of road, we assess MnDOT, they take the assessment that they owe us toward conveyance of the land back to the city?
That's a possibility, but that'd have to be a lot of negotiations. I believe this parcel, this parcel right here, the 25 acres, was acquired through what's known as a RELP funding program. And I believe, and I'd have to check this further, I haven't had enough time to really get into this, but I believe they have to offer it to the city first. We may have to do an appraisal and see what the actual value is, or maybe we can actually say we'll pay MnDOT what you paid for it. Those are a lot of negotiation, a lot of discussion that would have to occur. They have indicated they would not want to have assessments on their property until they turn it back or get rid of the property. But that's something we could negotiate. That is a potential.
Mayor, follow-up. The reason I bring it up is because when the 169 interchange gets built, that would be a great economic expansion piece. Especially if it's conveyed back to us.
I think Councilor Lehman, Mayor, I think I know where Councilor Lehman's going with this. One of the suggestions I would have is that we should pursue how we could obtain this parcels.
Correct.
And is it in the benefit of the city to get those parcels? And time it with the construction of the overpass and build those road improvements, because there would be some, that is a gap missing. It would help that area, not only transportation-wise, you're keeping traffic off of 169. That's why it's a route of regional significance. So that's why I'm suggesting, if I went ahead with the application now, we'd have to build it in 2013. The interchange comes in 2014. We might be best to wait a year or two.
Right.
So let me understand what you're saying. You're saying that the city would purchase it?
Well, MnDOT would convey it back to the city because it's excess right-of-way.
Okay.
And the city would commit to extending Veerling Drive. And the amount that we would then assess the MnDOT, that dollar amount, instead of assessing to MnDOT, would help convey this property back to us.
Okay.
And then we could turn around, once the overpass and stuff is done, this is a great opportunity for a business that wants to come to town in a high visibility location in a area of town that somewhat lacked direct access, that will now have good access in a side of town that, some say has died a little bit and needs to be brought back. I'd also point out that in our comp plan, this area is slated for a pretty decent commercial corner with some industrial around it. And what better way to get it started than to have somebody convey the prime property to us?
Right. Okay. Thank you.
I hate to telegraph all that to them, but, hopefully they ain't watching tonight.
Any other discussion? on this?
That's, if you want to, I don't know if you want to take action on this one first, and then we'll go to the next one.
What works best for you?
Um,
Okay.
I think I
let's-
can go, if,
Probably wait on this one till
I
next
think
year,
let's
huh?
wait, and then we'll go to the, well, my recommendation is that we would wait on
Okay,
on that,
everyone
but we'll get into that.
agree
But
with
then the
that?
next one,
Okay.
the next solicitation that we're looking at, it's called a mini roundabout project solicitation. It's something that's come out, MnDOT, and the federal government would like to have 2 locations. They have money for in order to try out a mini roundabout. And I'll go through what a mini roundabout is, but I want to go through some basic background information. We did have in the 2009 budget, we did start to identify the intersection of Burling and County Road 79 as an intersection that potentially needs to have some improvements from a 4-way stop to either a signal or roundabout. The traffic volumes there are such that each leg is about 5,000, I think there's 7,500 cars on the south leg coming north, and all the other 3 legs are about 5,000 to 6,000 cars. So they're pretty evenly split. And I think if you've ever driven that area at peak hours, you'll see that we do have quite a bit of backup. This is just an aerial view without anything on it, kind of to show, we have the ball field over here. Spencer Street, or County Road 79, is a 2-lane road. Burling Drive is a 4-lane undivided road. The proposal, if we went ahead, would be to narrow down the 2-lane roads, and I can show you that. This is an example, but everything would have to come down to a 1-lane. Cars would have to go around. They could make this turn. Most smaller cars would be able to make these turns at the roundabout. Larger vehicles such as trucks, school buses, fire vehicles would have to go across, which was called a transversable center island. So they would be able to drive over the island. That's how they would make the turn. We did do a concept drawing just showing how this could work. Just give you an idea how it would fit in the right-of-way in the existing intersection. We'd be able to do the pedestrian crossings here. And we didn't get a time to show everything, but we would be able to neck this down from 2 lanes to 1 lane on both sides, so everything would have 1 lane coming into the roundabout. The benefit of this particular design is it's much less cost. We estimated 200,000, but we started talking a little bit more. We probably can get it down even more, but for this purpose of the application, we're saying 200,000. $100,000 could come from the federal state application. The county and city would split the other remaining cost. The best thing that we see coming out of this would be operational efficiencies, some more traffic safety. We've had 12 accidents the last 3 years, but we think we can improve that. But it's mainly operation efficiencies, getting more cars with less delay through that intersection, and some environmental benefits because cars are basically at a yield sign versus a stop sign. If they can enter into the roundabout safely, they can move in there and make their turn and continue on. The county I sent you the information in the packet. Again, the advantage is we can handle higher vehicle capacity. A mini roundabout can handle up to 15,000 cars per day at the intersection. We're at about 12,000 when you look at it. So we're fitting that criteria. It'll be a lower cost. It works if we have low truck volumes, which we do. We've been out there measuring. Mainly we have school buses, not many other trucks, but it's mainly school, so it's very low volume. And again, the trucks or the vehicles, I do have a drawing showing that. A truck would be able to transverse right to the center. So that's how that would work. Cars would be going around the roundabout. So we can accomplish this, we feel, with minimum construction, signage, and, you know, a little bit of pavement added here and there because the county road isn't as wide as Verlin Drive. We'd have to do some things there. With that, the county would do the application, would do the project. We would have to send a letter of support for this application, recognizing that we probably would have some share of funding if we did get the application and did build it. If we did get the application, the intent would be to build it this year. So this has kind of come up kind of sudden. I wasn't in the CIP, but this application opportunity has come up. It's something we've been keeping an eye on, both the county staff and my staff, and it looks like a good proposal from our standpoint. And I'll take any questions you may have.
Councilor Whiting.
I may have missed it. Was there any studies on pedestrian traffic because of the junior high there?
The junior high? I mean, this is not Marshall Road, but this is
Burling.
Yeah. This junior high up here now.
Yeah. Is there a lot of pedestrian traffic, kids going to school, things like that?
We did not. I mean, I'm sure the school has those statistics. We do have a trail that runs all the way up on the west side to the school. We don't know what the crossing traffic is.
I wouldn't even know what to do if, in a roundabout situation with pedestrians. Obviously, you stop, but is there safety issues or concerns with that?
To tell you the truth, some of the studies I've read show roundabouts to be safer for pedestrians. You have, especially if you can create a refuge island in the middle, it does show them safer. Cars are slowing down, coming to the roundabout. If they can see the pedestrian, they're supposed to stop still if it's a crosswalk, which it is. And studies have basically shown they're actually a little safer, particularly if you have this refuge island in the middle. This would actually be painted. It wouldn't be a median. It would not be but it would give them a little more safety crossing.
Councilor Lehman.
Mayor, two questions. First one is, you said it wasn't in the CIP?
Pardon?
You said this project was not in the CIP?
We took it out. It was in the 2009.
Well, I'm seeing it in my 2011.
Yeah, it was it? I don't think we showed it in 2011, but it was in the 2009 CIP.
Okay.
And when we've been doing the budgets lately, we've been taking a lot of projects out of, we've been doing bare bones. And this was $650,000 to do a major roundabout. So we can actually do this for $200,000, but if we get $100,000, it'll only cost us $50,000.
Okay, and our cost on this major one on this sheet in front of us is $150,000.
Correct.
So it would be less than that. Okay, second question was, maybe I've got the same email as Councilman Whiting did, but there's a email that I received from a gal that's concerned about the roundabouts and the pedestrian crossings and stuff. Can you show us how that movement would be made? And then the second part of the question would be, since they're fairly new to Shakopee, would it make sense to sign all 4 entrances to a roundabout that, you know, I don't know, caution pedestrians, have right of way or something, until people get comfortable with how they're using these things?
This is a recommended signing and pavement marking out of the FHWA mini roundabout handbook. If you could see, there would definitely be more striping, more signage, more awareness for that crossing. And again, when people can get to there and they're in the crosswalk, people can see them now. It's one of the things that people have to be aware of, but I think people can walk, as you can see here, they're looking out for cars one way here. And then they can cross, and they have to look this way. So there is a little bit of safety island there, so to speak. Anytime you're crossing, it is a little more, you know, even with 4-way stops that people don't see or not aware. The objective would be to have good awareness, good visibility, good signage here, good striping so people can see these are crosswalks.
The little yellow sign that's got the little person on it. that-
Right here, yes,
That
that's
sign
a-
is gonna be key on all 4 quadrants.
Yeah. That's a pedestrian crosswalk sign. So this would actually be signed and striped very well. And again, you know, it points out the need that there would be pedestrian crossing there. And if a pedestrian is visible and in the crosswalk, people are supposed to stop.
Other questions? Bruce, I've got 2 questions. First off, it would finish the trail on the southwest corner of that intersection. Is that correct? It would still leave it off like it is right now?
Yes, I think we make those
Okay.
connections,
Yeah,
yes.
there's like a 15-foot gap in the trail right there.
Right. We would finish those.
Okay. And then, what if this doesn't work? What if people just don't get it? Since it's just painted, we can redo
We
it?
could take it out and repaint it.
Okay.
Put the stop signs back in. That's kind of one of the beautiful things about this design. If it doesn't work, then we could go back to what it was.
How long
by
do you think would
restriping.
be an acceptable period to see that? Are we talking, I'm assuming years, right?
Well, I would say at least, I mean, most of the places, and I've talked to a lot of my other peers that have put in roundabouts, they've had, you know, a lot of concerns that you're mentioning tonight. And I've asked, well, how is everybody accepting the roundabouts? Well, they've gotten used to it and they like them. So I think there is a transition period where people have to get used to these things and see how they work. And once they get used to it, they usually find out, especially if they don't have to wait as long as they have in the peak hours, they can move in the intersection. They'll get used to it and like it. It's a matter of, there is a adjustment period. I'd say a good year is needed for that.
Perfect. Any other questions?
I just want to point out, there's only going to be 2 successful candidates of the whole state of Minnesota. So we think we have a good project here, but that doesn't mean we're going to get even if we do go ahead. So first one, if we're ready to vote,
Yeah, I'm ready. Anyone else? Counselor Punt?
I'll offer a motion directing staff to write a letter of support to Scott County supporting an application for mini roundabout project solicitation for the intersection of Veerling Drive and County Road 79.
Second. Motion. Seconded by Counselor Clay. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? All right, that for the mini roundabout passes unanimously. And then you'd still like another one for the other part, or you just okay?
well, if the council is, I guess, I don't know if do we need a motion if you're in consensus and not to proceed
Any opposition to that? Just,
at this
Wait till
time?
next year, I guess? Yep, that's fine.
okay, perfect.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Loney. Now we're on to 10F2, Goals and Objectives Workshop Discussion, tabled from last meeting.
Need a motion to remove it from the table first.
Oh, we need a motion to remove from the
Mayor, I'll
table?
move to remove from the table.
Motion by Counselor Clay, seconded by Counselor Whiting. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Unanimous.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. As you'll recall, we had a discussion when the 4 of you were present 2 weeks ago as to whether we would have a goals and objectives workshop, and at which point we would put together a work plan for the next 2 years, if that's what you chose to do. I believe we reached a consensus that it was a good thing to do, and I think there was also some nodding of head that we could perhaps do it at the Shakopee Public Utilities Boardroom, as it's away from City Hall, but it also offers the opportunity to have cable casting done at a later time. The thing that was not able to be reached was whether this was going to be a facilitated retreat or whether you would want staff to lead the discussion. It was split 2-2, and based on that, it was tabled so that there could be a 5th person to break the tie.
Pressure.
All eyes are on Pamela.
Exactly, so Counselor Punt, there was, I don't know if we call it significant discussion, but discussion about having the merits of bringing someone from outside the city in or having it facilitated by a city staff member. And Councilor Whiting and I believed that bringing somebody in was valuable. Councilors Clay and Lehman at the time thought that doing it by city staff, is that still accurate? Any other additional discussion to that?
I'll do it for 500.
You said that last time.
Well, I just thought I'd remind you.
Yeah.
Lower your price.
You were
I thought it was 6, yeah.
So that's kind of where we're at. So do you have discussion,
Alright.
questions?
Great, well, I have had time to review and reflect upon this. And
Uh-oh.
based on that and based on my experience in other groups and business, et cetera, I do believe actually that bringing a facilitator in allows our city staff to play a different role in the meeting. It frees them to be participants versus having to run the meeting and direct the conversation. It also creates a, kind of a neutral party that's directing the conversation. Not to say that the city staff would take us down a road intentionally, but when you bring in a third party, you do get the benefit of that neutrality. And so that's one thing. And then also just allowing the city staff to be participants in the discussion and contributing in that way versus facilitating. Because facilitating is very different than participating in a meeting. You have to direct the conversation, prepare for a meeting in a different way to determine, what outcomes are we trying to get at and how can we potentially get there. I also think someone outside could bring us, maybe a different process that we haven't experienced before. So it's my
All right.
opinion.
Like a bar setting or something?
Eventually.
I just joked at my cough drop. That's not good.
Mr. Mayor, based on that, it would appear that there is a majority that would like more information on facilitator. What I can do is I will make contact with those, with some individuals I know that do this and can get some dates that might be available. We can set a date or consider setting a date at the next meeting. Would that be acceptable?
Unless the mayor and Mr. Whiting have changed their minds since the last time.
No, I believe Councilor Punt summed it up pretty well. I believe the same thing.
I concur. Do you need anything more from us?
No, I believe we have the direction that we need. Thank you.
All right. 10F2 is done. Councilmember reports. Let's start with Councilor Whiting.
Oh, thank you, Mr. Mayor. Members of the council, I attended the school board meeting on January 9th. 4 new members were installed and sworn in. Carla Schutrup, who was here, left earlier. She was elected as the chair. Reggie Bowerman, vice chair. Angela Tucker, clerk. Matt McKean, treasurer. The board is working on looking at a new direction and new concept for an area learning center. Removing themselves from the one in Chaska at this point. That may include a focus on STEM education. Science, technology, and math is a possible curriculum for that, and that could be a big draw for other students from other areas. The board approved a new position as an assistant superintendent, and I will be posting that position. They also accepted the resignation of long-term elementary principal Libby Bergen. I don't know if those two are related items or not. We'll see, I guess. And I think maybe it's a good opportunity to offer a motion of appreciation for Libby Bergen as a 20-year principal for several different elementary schools. I don't know if that's appropriate, but maybe a good idea.
I think that's a school board function.
When will
isn't it?
she be ending her?
I believe it is,
The end of the school
End of
year,
school
as
year?
I
yeah, I
understand
think
it.
it is, yeah, out there a little bit. But I don't know if that's just a appreciation thought, anyway. And, yeah, I'll make that motion to
Before you make the motion, since it's not time sensitive right now, why don't we research maybe some ideas that might be appropriate to recognize somebody who's been a long-term contributor to the community, and we'll bring it back to you and see if that's something that you'd want to do.
if it's appropriate, I appreciate that.
Thank
Yeah,
you.
Thank you. And plan on attending the chamber board meeting tomorrow.
Councilor Clay.
Hours ago tonight at 5 o'clock, I was at a SPUC meeting before coming to this one. They've have been taking advantage of the nice snowless weather we've been having to get a lot of repair work done on various things. There's a couple of wells that are currently being taken offline to get some repair work done on those pump motors. They intend to do try to do most of the well repair maintenance work during the winter when there's less water demand on them. The city of Shakopee's fire department and the SPUC crews were able to get together and for some aerial service testing, I guess going up high and doing things for insurance purposes. So there's a nice collaboration between the two organizations that way. And then generally just sort of a heads up for something that will probably be coming along in the next year or so. The old Shakopee electrical substation, which is down by RAR, the equipment in there is getting quite old and pretty much used up its expected lifetime. The transformer is actually owned by whatever it used to be NSP, and so they're talking about, instead of we pay a significant amount of money each year for transformer services, but using their transformer to get the electricity down from the higher voltage power lines. So we're looking at, or SPUC is looking at, possibly redoing that substation, maybe taking it over from them, putting in our own transformer, and or some combination of the two. That would be something that'll be coming down the line, and probably sometime in the next year. And we do have, we did pass an agreement tonight for the cost sharing for the undergrounding of the power lines for the 169 project. I think that's it for tonight.
All right. Councilor Lehman.
Thursday, the 12th, attended the Shakopee DOJ fence discussion, Department of Justice up there. Didn't get to the 169 Corridor Coalition meeting because I didn't get a notification of it. Did bring that to Mr. McNeil's attention. Apparently he's gonna make sure the list is accurate and stuff, so.
They've been notified.
All right, so that's taken care of. You were at the fence meeting, so you know what took place there, and I'm sure everybody else probably went to theirs, so that issue will be coming back. That's all I have.
I have no update tonight, thank you.
I had my very first Scale meeting last Friday, and Scale adopted a legislative slate and talked about procedures and just basically how Scale works, and had quite a discussion on basically the internal workings of Scale, of which a lot I didn't really understand, having not been to any meetings before. So it was good meeting. They got that taken care of. I also attended the at the Women's Correction at the Minnesota Correction Facility meeting, and there was a fair amount of opposition to the fence and a fair amount of positivity toward the fence, and so it was overall a good meeting just to get everybody's feelings out there as well. And then this morning I attended at the correctional facility as well. All the senators from the bonding committee came through this morning and they asked me to come along with that and talk to them just about general feelings of what the community thinks about it. So that was very good there, and I think that's all my notes from now.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
One item of clarification, and Councilor Lehman raised it. When I contacted the 169 Coalition, they asked to know who the official representative was for the city. As I reported, that former Mayor Schmidt was the citizen representative, and that you, Councilor Lehman, were the other representative. It was my response to them that if you are there, you would be the official representative. If you are absent, then Mr. Schmidt would be the official vote for the city. Is that accurate?
Yes.
Does that work for people?
Okay.
Thank you.
Okay. All right, other business? Anyone have any other business need to bring up? Councilor Lehman.
Do we want to have staff bring back a resolution of support for Racino?
I don't have desire to do that right now.
Okay, well, the bill's been introduced, and probably won't hurt to support it.
Couldn't have been introduced. Legislation's not in session.
That's what I thought, but apparently a lot happens before they get in session because the bill's introduced and it's got a couple different signers on it.
By whom?
Mr. Mayor, I believe it was Michael Beard and
Beard
Senator
Biskins
Biskins. or
and
Representative Biskins.
Beard Biskins and three other signers on it.
Okay.
Past councils have supported when the issue came up. This council hasn't taken a position. At some point, we're gonna be asked, I'm sure.
Absolutely. What do we think? Do we want to approach that now? Councilor Punt?
It seems like when it's formally introduced on the floor, might be an appropriate timing to take a look at it. Session starts next week, so I guess if staff could keep your eye on it
Well, that's what I was saying.
prior to the
is
7th.
If we direct staff now, we wouldn't see it until our next meeting.
Councilor Clay?
In the past, it's been my understanding that the different machinations that has taken over the years is that there's always been a little bit of a taste involved for the city to cover expenses. I think we should be, if we're gonna vote one way or another on it, we should first find out if that is still in there.
Mr. Mayor?
Yes, sir.
Previous introductions of Racino have included 1% for the city and 1% for the county to offset additional expenses for that. It's my understanding from speaking with Senator Roebling that it would likely be included in that, and so if this is something that you wanted to see happen, we would potentially, if you wanted to act on a resolution of support, you could include that in there, but that's your call.
2%. We'll approve no support, minimum less than 5.
20?
There you go. Is that something we would like to tackle as a board, as a
Well, I think,
council?
Mayor, I think we should just have staff on notice that if it stays on the floor and they get in session and it's moving, then we should probably bring a resolution back.
I would rather address it or not address it and not leave it up in limbo.
Okay?
I'd rather see if it has any life or breath first before voting one way or another.
Councilor Whiting?
Mr. Mayor, or members of the council, do you believe that it would help the cause to have the resolution when it's introduced?
I do.
Why?
Well, if the home city doesn't support what they're doing, well, the last 2 times they came here specifically for our support.
2%. They want our support.
Good with 3, 4, whatever.
All right, so we're lacking consensus here.
So let's wait.
So we're lacking consensus as if we should wait or if we should move forward. Councilor Whiting,
I would suggest we put it there with it, gives it a little backbone.
all right. Councilor Clay believes we should wait. Is that accurate? Lehman?
I think we should support our past support with it, with the clause in there that there's an offset for our expenses, which is has been in the past.
Councilor Punt?
From a timing perspective, it would make sense to see a draft on the 8th because we'll have a couple weeks of session by then.
Okay, there we go.
We'll bring it back at the next meeting.
Any other business?
Need to adjourn to closed session, recess to
Recess.
closed session for the purpose of discussing pending labor negotiations.
We need a motion to go
Yes,
into
you
closed
do.
session, correct?
Yep.
Councilor Lehman?
Make a motion to recess for an executive session to discuss labor negotiations.
We have a second?
Second?
Councilor Punt, any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Unanimously, we recess for executive session at 10:01. All right, at 10:14, we reconvene from closed session with no action taken, and we give the floor to Ms. Wilson.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor and council members. The last agenda item before you this evening is approval of a labor agreement with the city's public works employees. This is one of three unionized employee groups that the city has. It represents 20 employees in the public works department, 17 maintenance operators, and 3 mechanics. An agreement has been reached with the Teamsters Local 320, which represents this bargaining unit. The terms of the agreement are as follows. A 2-year contract covering calendar year 2012 and 2013, with a 2% general wage increase on January 1st of each of those 2 years. In addition, it grants a full-day holiday on Christmas Eve rather than the current half-day holiday. And it adds 2 new forms of licensure and certification pay. This is a financial incentive we put out there for our employees to achieve certain licenses and certifications that we find useful in the operation of the city and the department. The 2 new categories would be 50 cents an hour for employees holding a DOT inspector certification. That's something that would be available to our mechanics. And a 50-cent per hour bonus or incentive for those with a playground inspector certification. The terms of the contract are very, very similar with those recently negotiated with the city's other 2 units representing our patrol officers and our sergeants. And therefore, staff would recommend that council approve the contract and authorize the appropriate officials to sign it on the city's behalf.
Thank you, Ms. Wilson. Are there any questions for her? Councilor Lehman?
Mayor, I make a motion to approve the attached contract for the Public Works Union 320 and authorize the appropriate city officials to sign it on behalf of the city.
Second.
Motion made by Councilor Lehman, seconded by Councilor Whiting. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Passes unanimously. All right, thank you very much, Ms. Wilson. Item number 15, I'll entertain a motion to adjourn.
So moved. Not required.
Actually, that's correct.
Not required?
Because it's the last meeting of the month.
Oh, good to know, but
Yeah.
thank you. So, motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Councilor Punt,
Second.
seconded by Councilor Whiting. Any discussion? All those in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Meeting is adjourned at 10:16. Thank you very much, everyone.